Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Here, dust never settles on the ground. Really? You can see it hanging in the air for hours after a vehicle passes, as if it has forgotten to fall. This was the first thing Lance Porter noticed in the desert surrounding the Nevada test range. Even before that night on Range Road 17, everything seemed to defy the laws of physics. Lance had been working as a security patrol officer at the test site for 6 years. It wasn't the kind of job you'd want to brag about at parties, and there weren't many parties in this part of Nevada anyway. Routine tasks filled most of the shifts. Patrolling the perimeter, checking gates, reporting by radio every hour. The test site covered hundreds of square miles. Sagebrush, alkaline plains, and mountains that seemed to rise as if God had stopped creating them halfway. But Lance knew things. Things civilians didn't know. Things even most of the personnel at the site didn't know. He'd seen the craters from tests that were never announced. He'd escorted convoys carrying equipment that didn't match any military spec he recognized. And he'd read incident reports that got filed under classifications he didn't have clearance to discuss. Still, he showed up for his shift every night, drove his assigned routes, and kept his mouth shut. That was the job. Isabel Cruz was different. She'd only been at the site for 3 months, working as a materials engineer in one of the deep labs they'd carved into the mountain. She asked questions. Too many questions, some of the old-timers said. But she was brilliant, and the project leads let her get away with it, because she could solve problems no one else could touch. Lance met her at the main gate one evening in August. She was waiting for a ride back to her quarters after pulling a double shift. Her face was drawn, eyes red from staring at whatever classified screens they had her monitoring. "Long day?" Lance asked through his window. Isabel nodded. Every day is long when you're not allowed to talk about what you're working on. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You heading toward the south perimeter?" "That's the route." "Mind if I catch a ride? My transport is delayed and I just want to sleep." Lance hesitated. Regulations said no unauthorized personnel in patrol vehicles. But Isabel had clearance, and the site commander had been lenient lately about ride shares during off-peak hours. "Get in." They drove in silence for the first 10 miles. The sun was setting behind the spring mountains, painting the sky in shades of rust and violet. The radio crackled occasionally with chatter from other patrols, but out here you were mostly alone with your thoughts. Isabel finally spoke. "Do you ever see anything weird out here?" Lance kept his eyes on the road. "Define weird." "I don't know. Lights, objects, things that don't make sense. You working on something that makes you ask that question?" She laughed softly. "Everything I work on makes me ask that question." They passed checkpoint Delta 7, a small guard station manned by a single officer who waved them through without question. Beyond that point, the landscape changed. The road narrowed, the vegetation thinned, and the mountains seemed to lean in closer, like they were listening. Range Road 17 was a maintenance route that connected the southern test grid to the main facility. It wasn't used much anymore, not since they'd shut down that sector after an incident in the 70s. No one talked about what had happened, but the road remained on the patrol schedule. "You ever been down 17? Isabel asked. Lance glanced at her. "Why do you ask?" "One of the senior engineers mentioned it. Said something happened out there once. Said the old guys still won't go near it after dark." "Old guys talk too much. So something did happen." Lance didn't answer. He turned on to Range Road 17, and the pavement immediately worsened. Cracks spiderwebbed across the asphalt, filled in with sand and gravel. The headlights cut through the growing darkness, illuminating nothing but empty road ahead. They'd been driving for maybe 5 minutes when the radio went silent. Not static, not interference, just silence. Lance tapped the receiver. Patrol 7 to base. Radio check. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. That normal? Isabel asked. No. Then the headlights flickered. It was brief, less than a second, but unmistakable. The entire electrical system dimmed, then came back. Lance's hands tightened on the wheel. He'd driven this route dozens of times. The vehicle was new, well-maintained. There was no reason for a power fluctuation. Lance. Isabel was looking out her window up at the sky. He slowed the vehicle and followed her gaze. 3 white lights hung in the air to the east, maybe 1,000 feet up. They weren't moving. They weren't blinking. They just hovered. Perfectly still. Perfectly silent. Lance stopped the vehicle. The engine idled. The radio remained dead. The lights stayed where they were. "What are those?" Isabel whispered. "I don't know. Are they ours? I don't know." The lights were arranged in a triangular formation, each one equidistant from the others. As Lance watched, they began to rotate slowly, maintaining their geometric relationship. No sound, no visible means of propulsion, just 3 points of white light spinning in the empty desert sky. Then the engine died. The sudden silence was oppressive. No idle, no radio, no dash lights. The headlights faded to black. They sat in complete darkness except for the glow of the 3 lights above them. Isabel's breathing quickened. "Lance, what's happening?" "Stay calm." He reached for the ignition, tried to restart the engine. Nothing. Not even a click. The battery was completely dead. Outside, the air began to change. Lance couldn't explain it, but he could feel it. A pressure building, like the atmosphere itself was compressing around the vehicle. His ears popped. The lights began to descend. Slowly at first, then faster. They dropped from 1,000 feet to 500, then to 200. Close enough now that Lance could see they weren't individual lights at all. They were 3 points on a single object. A massive, dark, triangular craft. It was enormous, easily the size of a football field. The underside was featureless, matte black, absorbing what little starlight filtered through the atmosphere. The 3 white lights at each corner pulsed softly, not flickering, but breathing, like they were alive. Isabel grabbed his arm. Her grip was iron. "We need to leave. We need to leave right now. The engine's dead. Then we run. We're 30 miles from the nearest building." The craft stopped directly above them, hovering at perhaps 50 feet. Lance could feel the weight of it, the sheer mass pressing down on the desert floor. But there was no sound. No roar of engines, no hum of machinery. Just silence. And then the dust began to rise. Not blown by wind. There was no wind. The dust simply lifted from the ground, slowly, gently, as if gravity had decided to take a break. It swirled upward in lazy spirals, illuminated by the glow from the craft. Lance tried the ignition again. Still nothing. The lights on the craft's underside intensified, shifting from white to pale blue. The pressure in the air increased. Lance's vision blurred at the edges. Isabel was saying something, but her voice sounded distant, like she was underwater. He blinked, tried to focus. The blue light was filling the cab now, pouring through the windshield, through the doors, through the metal itself. It didn't cast shadows. It just existed everywhere at once. Isabel's hand slipped from his arm. He turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, staring up through the windshield at something he couldn't see. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Isabel?" She didn't respond. The light grew brighter. Lance felt something pulling at him, not physically, but deeper, like something was tugging at the core of his awareness, trying to separate him from his body. He fought it, gripped the steering wheel, focused on breathing in, out, in, out. The light peaked, so bright he had to close his eyes, and then it was gone. The sound of the engine idling jolted him back. The headlights were on. The radio crackled with static, then cleared. "Patrol 7, this is base. We lost your signal. Confirm your position." Lance grabbed the receiver with shaking hands. "Base, this is Patrol 7. We're on Range Road 17. We had a vehicle malfunction. Copy that, 7. Do you need assistance?" He looked at Isabel. She was staring straight ahead, breathing rapidly, her face pale. "Negative, base. We're operational now. Continuing patrol." "Roger 7, report in at checkpoint Delta 9. Lance set the receiver down and put the vehicle in gear. His hands were trembling. He drove slowly, eyes scanning the sky, but the lights were gone. The craft was gone. The desert was empty again. They drove in silence for 5 minutes before Isabel finally spoke. "Did that just happen?" "Yes." "What was it?" "I don't know." "Are you going to report it?" Lance thought about that. Thought about the forms he'd have to fill out, the interviews, the questions, the way they'd look at him. "No." "Why not?" "Because they already know." Isabel turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "You've been here 3 months. I've been here 6 years. You think this is the first time something like this has happened? You think they put a test site in the middle of nowhere because it's convenient." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You've seen things before. I've seen reports, heard stories, had conversations I'm not supposed to remember. And? And the answer is always the same. It didn't happen. You didn't see it. Go back to work." They reached checkpoint Delta 9. The guard waved them through. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Except when Lance checked the odometer later, he realized something was wrong. They'd traveled 37 miles on Range Road 17. The road was only 12 miles long. And when he looked at his watch, he saw that 3 hours had passed since they'd left Delta 7. 3 hours for a drive that should have taken 40 minutes. Lance sat in his vehicle in the parking lot outside his quarters, staring at the numbers on the dashboard. 37 miles, 3 hours. The math didn't work. The geography didn't work. Nothing about what had just happened made any kind of sense. He looked over at Isabel. She was checking her phone, scrolling through something with a frown deepening on her face. "What is it?" he asked. "My photos. I took a picture of the sunset when we left Delta 7. I remember doing it. I was leaning out the window." "Okay. Look at the next photo." She turned the screen toward him. The image was gray and white static, like someone had photographed a television with no signal. Grainy. Distorted. Wrong. "I didn't take that," Isabel said. "But it's time-stamped 9:17 p.m., right when we should have been arriving at Delta 9. Lance felt his stomach drop. "Let me see." He took her phone and examined the image more closely. The static wasn't random. There were patterns in it, subtle geometric shapes that repeated across the frame. Triangles within triangles, spirals, symbols that looked almost like writing, but weren't any alphabet he recognized. "Do you see it?" Isabel asked. "See what?" "The patterns. They're not random." Lance handed the phone back. Delete it. What? Delete the photo. Delete any record of tonight. Trust me. But this is evidence. This proves something happened. It proves we saw something we weren't supposed to see. And that's dangerous. Isabel stared at him for a long moment, then looked back at her phone. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. I can't, she said quietly. I need to understand what happened to us. Then keep it. But don't show it to anyone. Don't talk about it. And don't go looking for answers because you won't like what you find. He got out of the vehicle and headed toward his quarters, leaving Isabel sitting alone in the passenger seat, staring at the impossible image on her screen. That night, Lance couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blue light, felt the pressure, heard the silence where sound should have been. He kept thinking about the missing time. 3 hours, 180 minutes, gone, erased. And he had no memory of where they went or what happened during that gap. He sat up in bed and grabbed his laptop. If he was going to be awake, he might as well do something productive. Lance had access to the facility's internal database. Not the classified stuff, but the operational logs, maintenance records, and historical archives. He'd spent enough late nights poking around in there to know where the interesting files were buried. He searched for Range Road 17. The results came back immediately. Hundreds of entries spanning decades. Maintenance logs, patrol reports, equipment failures. Most of it was routine, but scattered throughout were anomalous entries. October 12, 1983. Electrical failure. Cause unknown. June 3, 19th. Communications blackout. Duration 47 minutes. February 18, 91. Vehicle found abandoned. Driver missing. Located 3 days later with no memory of incident. September 7, 98. Multiple witnesses report aerial lights. No radar contact. Lance kept scrolling. The incidents were consistent. Every few months, sometimes every few weeks, something happened on Range Road 17. And every time, the official explanation was technical malfunction, atmospheric phenomenon, or human error. But Lance knew better now. He'd been there. He'd seen it. He clicked on one of the older entries dated July 1952. The file opened to a scanned document, yellowed and faded. A military report marked classified, eyes only. Project Blue Desert, initial survey. Following reports of unusual aerial activity in the Nevada Test Range area, a survey team was dispatched to investigate. Between July 15th and July 30th, 1952, team members observed multiple instances of unidentified craft operating in restricted airspace. Objects displayed flight characteristics inconsistent with known aircraft. Silent operation. Instantaneous acceleration. Ability to hover without visible means of propulsion. On July 23rd, a craft matching previous descriptions was observed at close range by Captain James Morrison and Lieutenant Paul Garrett. Both officers reported a sense of time distortion during the encounter. Upon return to base, their watches showed significant discrepancy with facility clocks. Recommendation: establish permanent monitoring station. Continue observation protocol. Status: ongoing. Lance stared at the screen. 1952. They'd known about this since 1952. 70 years of incidents, and they were still just watching. Still just taking notes. He clicked through more files, found more reports, more witnesses, more missing time. And then he found something that made his blood run cold. A personnel file for a security officer named David Brennan. Brennan had worked at the facility from 1979 to 1982. His record was exemplary. Commendations, perfect attendance, no disciplinary issues, until February 14, 1982. That night, Brennan had been on patrol on Range Road 17. He'd radioed in a report of unusual lights, and then his signal went dead. A search team found him 3 days later, wandering in the desert 15 miles from where he'd last been seen. He was dehydrated, sunburned, and couldn't speak coherently. Medical evaluation noted severe psychological trauma. Brennan was placed on medical leave and eventually discharged. The final note in his file read, "Subject continues to claim abduction by non-human entities. Recommend permanent psychiatric care." There was a photograph attached to the file. Brennan before the incident. Young, confident, clear-eyed, and another photograph from after. Same man, but different. His eyes were hollow, his expression vacant, like something essential had been removed from him. Lance closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of his room. He thought about Isabel, about the photo on her phone, about the missing hours they couldn't account for, and he wondered if they were already changing, if whatever had happened out there on Range Road 17 had already begun to hollow them out the way it had hollowed out David Brennan. A knock on his door made him jump. He checked his watch. 2:47 a.m. Another knock, softer this time. Lance got up and opened the door. Isabel stood in the hallway, still in her work clothes, her hair disheveled. "I can't stop thinking about it," she said without preamble. "Neither can I. Can I come in?" He stepped aside. She walked past him and sat on the edge of his bunk, wrapping her arms around herself. "I've been going through the data from my lab," she said. "We monitor electromagnetic radiation across the test range. Standard environmental surveying. But I started looking at the historical data, going back months. And there's a pattern, a signal. It repeats every 72 hours. Always at the same frequency, always coming from the same location." "Which location?" "South of Range Road 17. 7 miles into restricted territory." Lance felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 6 months. Maybe longer. The data's fragmented, but the pattern is consistent." She pulled out her phone and showed him a graph. A series of spikes, regular as a heartbeat, appearing and disappearing in predictable intervals. "What kind of signal is it?" "That's the thing. It's not like anything I've seen before. It's too weak to be communication, but too strong to be natural background radiation. And the frequency, it's not used by any human technology I'm aware of." "Could it be military?" "If it is, it's not ours. And it's not showing up on any official monitoring systems. I only found it because I was running pattern analysis on raw data." Lance sat down next to her. "You need to stop looking into this." "Why?" "Because people who ask too many questions at this site don't last long. You saw what happened to us tonight. Do you really want to dig deeper?" Isabel looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but there was a fire in them that hadn't been there before. "Yes," she said, "I do. Because whatever happened to us out there, whatever that thing was, it's still happening. And it's been happening for decades. Don't you want to know why?" Lance thought about David Brennan, about the hollow look in his eyes. "I want to survive," he said quietly. "Maybe we can do both." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the base was quiet. Security lights cast long shadows across the empty roads. "There's something else," she said. "The signal I found. It activated tonight, right around the time we were on Range Road 17. How do you know?" "Because I've been monitoring it in real time since I found it. Every 72 hours it pulses, and tonight, at 8:47 p.m., it pulsed again." Lance checked his watch. they'd turned onto Range Road 17 at approximately 8:45 p.m. You think it's connected to what we saw? I think whatever is generating that signal is also responsible for the lights, the craft, everything. Then we need to stay away from it. Isabel turned to face him. Or we need to find out what's generating it. That's insane. Maybe. But I can't just pretend this didn't happen, can you? Lance wanted to say yes. Wanted to tell her to forget about it, to go back to work, to follow the rules. But he couldn't because she was right. Whatever was out there had touched them, changed them, and ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to go back. I want to find the source of that signal." "That's restricted territory. We'd need authorization." "Your security. I have site clearance. We can access the maintenance roads. And if we get caught, then we deal with it. But at least we'll know." Lance looked at her for a long time. Thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Thought about David Brennan and all the others who'd gone looking for answers and come back broken. But he also thought about the missing 3 hours. About the feeling of being pulled apart. About the certainty that whatever was out there wasn't finished with them. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow night, after the shift change. There's a maintenance access road that runs south from Delta 7. It's technically on the patrol route. Technically. 1 hour. We go in, we find the source, we document it, and we leave. And if we see something, then we run." Lance stood up and walked to his locker. He pulled out a map of the test range and spread it on his desk. "Show me exactly where you want to go." Isabel leaned over the map and traced a path with her finger. South from Delta 7, following the old maintenance road, then cutting east into the restricted zone. "The signal originates somewhere in this area," she said, circling a section of blank desert on the map. "There's nothing on any official chart. No buildings, no equipment, nothing. Then maybe there's nothing there. Or maybe there's something they don't want documented." Lance studied the map. The area Isabel had circled was remote even by test range standards. No roads, no landmarks, just empty desert surrounded by mountains. "If we do this," he said, "we do it my way. We take precautions. We bring equipment. And if anything, and I mean anything, goes wrong, we abort immediately." "Agreed. And you delete that photo." Isabel hesitated, then nodded. "After we get back. If we find nothing, I'll delete it. Deal." She left a few minutes later, and Lance was alone again with the map and his thoughts. He knew this was a mistake. Knew they were crossing a line they couldn't uncross. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was living with the not knowing, with the missing hours, with the certainty that something had been done to them and they might never understand what. He folded up the map and lay back on his bunk. Sleep didn't come for a long time. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Lance went through his shift on autopilot, driving his assigned routes, checking his gates, radioing in on schedule. But his mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, calculating risks, wondering if this was the day his career, or his life, would end. Isabel texted him once, mid-afternoon. "Still on for tonight?" He replied, "Yes." At 1900 hours, Lance signed out a patrol vehicle for routine perimeter maintenance. The duty officer barely looked up from his paperwork. By 1930, he was parked at the rendezvous point 3 miles south of the main facility. Isabel arrived 10 minutes later in her personal vehicle, a battered Honda Civic that looked out of place among the military-spec trucks and SUVs that filled the base parking lots. She transferred her equipment to Lance's patrol vehicle, a handheld EMF detector, a Jeep unit, a high-resolution camera, and a backpack full of batteries and recording devices. Ready? She asked. No, Lance said honestly, but let's go anyway. They drove south on the main access road, following the route Lance had memorized from the map. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of amber and crimson. Within an hour, it would be fully dark. They passed checkpoint Delta 7 without incident. The guard on duty was someone Lance knew, a veteran named Rodriguez who'd been at the site longer than anyone could remember. Rodriguez waved them through, then leaned into Lance's window. "You heading down 17?" he asked. "Maintenance run," Lance said. "Should be back in a few hours." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Be careful out there. Gets weird after dark." "Always does." They drove on, and Lance felt Rodriguez's eyes on them until they disappeared around a bend in the road. "He knows," Isabel said. "He suspects. There's a difference. You think he's seen things too? Everyone who's been here long enough has seen something. They just don't talk about it." The maintenance road split off from the main route about 2 miles past Delta 7. Lance turned onto it, and the ride immediately became rougher. This road wasn't maintained regularly. Potholes and washouts made the going slow. They drove for 20 minutes, deeper into the restricted zone. The landscape changed subtly. Fewer plants, more exposed rock, a sense of isolation that went beyond mere distance from civilization. Isabel checked her EMF detector. "Signal's getting stronger. We're close." "How close?" "Maybe another mile, maybe less." They crested a small ridge, and Lance stopped the vehicle. Below them, in a shallow basin surrounded by low hills, was something that shouldn't have been there. A structure, small, maybe 30 feet across, partially buried in the sand. Concrete walls, weathered and cracked by decades of exposure. A single door, rusted and hanging at an angle. "What is that?" Isabel whispered. "I don't know. It's not on any map I've seen." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them staring at the impossible building in the middle of nowhere. The EMF detector in Isabel's hands was beeping steadily, the readout spiking higher than it had all evening. "That's it," she said. "That's the source." Lance put the vehicle in gear and drove slowly down into the basin. He parked 50 feet from the structure and killed the engine. The silence that followed was profound. No wind, no insects, no birds. Just empty desert and the weight of the sky pressing down. They got out carefully. Lance had his flashlight, Isabel had her camera. They approached the structure together, neither of them speaking. The door was open. Inside, darkness. Lance shined his light through the doorway. The interior was a single room, maybe 15 feet square. Empty except for debris, broken equipment, papers scattered across a concrete floor, layers of dust thick enough to show their footprints. But on the far wall, something caught his eye. A panel, old style, with analog dials and switches. And beneath it, a metal desk with drawers hanging open. They stepped inside. The air was cooler here, and there was a smell Lance couldn't quite identify. Metallic, chemical, wrong. Isabel went to the panel and examined it closely. "This is monitoring equipment, old, probably from the 50s or 60s. "Monitoring what?" "I don't know. The labels are faded." Lance moved to the desk and pulled open the remaining drawers. Most were empty. But in the bottom drawer he found something. A logbook. Leather-bound, edges worn, pages yellowed with age. He pulled it out and opened it carefully. The first entry was dated March 15, 1952. "Isabel, look at this." She came over and they read together, Lance holding the flashlight while Isabel turned pages. The entries were handwritten, each one brief and clinical. March 15, 1952, 0:30 hours. 3 lights observed bearing 045. Duration, 4 minutes. No sound. March 22nd, 1952, 0310 hours. Single object, oval-shaped. Altitude estimated 500 feet. Radar contact confirmed. April 3rd, 1952, 055 hours. Multiple objects. Formation flight. Disappeared at high velocity. The entries went on for pages. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one documenting another sighting, another incident, another encounter with something that shouldn't exist. Lance flipped to the last entry. It was dated 6 days ago. August 24th, 1905 hours. Event confirmed. 2 personnel affected. Pattern consistent. Recommend continued monitoring. Below it, in different handwriting. Source remains active. Cycle unchanged. Authorization required for intervention. They've been watching this place for 70 years, Isabel said quietly. Just watching and documenting. Not just watching, look at this. Lance had found another entry, dated 1982. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. February 17, 1982. Officer Brennan recovered. Medical evaluation pending. Subject claims missing time, possible abduction. Psychological trauma evident. Recommendation: no further patrols on Road 17 until pattern analysis complete. Isabel looked at Lance. Brennan, you know that name? I found his file last night. He was a security officer. Went out on patrol and came back different. Different how? Broken. They discharged him, put him in psychiatric care. Isabel wrapped her arms around herself. This is what happens to people who get too close. Yes. Then why are they still sending patrols out there? Why not just close the road? Because they want to study it. They want to understand it, and they're willing to sacrifice people to do it. A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, crunching on gravel. Lance killed his flashlight. They stood in darkness, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Then a voice. I know you're in there. Lance recognized the voice. Rodriguez. He turned his flashlight back on and stepped to the doorway. Rodriguez stood in the fading twilight, his sidearm holstered but his hand resting on it. You two really shouldn't be here, Rodriguez said. We're on a maintenance patrol, Lance said. Bullshit. I've been working this site for 23 years. I know what a maintenance patrol looks like, and this isn't it. Then why didn't you stop us at Delta 7? Rodriguez smiled grimly. Because I did the same thing you're doing, 20 years ago. Came out here looking for answers. Did you find any? Found enough to know I should have stayed away. Isabel stepped out of the structure. You've seen it too. The lights. The craft. Seen it. Been inside it. Lost time I'll never get back. Lance felt his chest tighten. You were abducted? That's what I told the doctors. They didn't believe me. Put me on psych leave. But I came back. Passed all their tests. Convinced them I was stable. Were you? No. But I learned to fake it. Learned to keep my mouth shut. Learned that some questions don't have answers you want to hear. He gestured toward the structure. This place? They built it in 1951, right after the first sightings. Thought they could monitor the phenomenon, maybe communicate with it. Spent millions on equipment, brought in scientists from all over the country. What happened? Nothing. Whatever's out here doesn't care about our equipment, doesn't care about our questions. It just does what it does. And we watch. What about the signal? Isabel asked. The electromagnetic pulse that repeats every 72 hours. Rodriguez nodded. You found that, huh? Smart. Most people never notice it. But yeah, it's there. Has been for as long as we've been monitoring. What is it? A beacon, a marker, a heartbeat. Take your pick, no one knows. But you have theories. Theories don't matter. What matters is survival. And you two aren't going to survive if you keep digging into this. Lance stepped closer to Rodriguez. Are you threatening us? I'm warning you. Same warning someone should have given me 20 years ago. Walk away. Forget what you saw. Go back to your jobs and your lives and pretend none of this ever happened. We can't do that, Isabel said. Something happened to us on Range Road 17. We lost 3 hours, and we need to understand what. Rodriguez looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled something from his pocket. A photograph. Faded, bent at the corners. He handed it to Isabel. The photo showed a man in his 30s, smiling, standing next to a patrol vehicle. He looked healthy, happy, whole. That was me, Rodriguez said. Before, he pulled out another photo. The same man, but different. Hollow eyes, gaunt face, the smile was gone. That was me after. Took 6 months before I looked human again. Took years before I stopped hearing the voices. Voices? Lance asked. In my head, not words, just frequencies, patterns, like someone was trying to tune a radio inside my skull. Eventually, they faded, but they never went away completely. He took the photos back. You want to know what happened to your 3 hours? You want to know what they did to you up there? Yes. Then go back to Range Road 17 tonight, when the signal pulses, and wait. Wait for what? For them to come back, because they always come back. And maybe this time, they'll give you the answers you're looking for, or maybe they'll take more from you than you're willing to lose. He turned and walked back toward his vehicle, which Lance now saw was parked beyond the ridge. Rodriguez, Lance called after him. Why are you helping us? The older man stopped and looked back. Because someone should have helped me. And because you're going to do this whether I warn you or not. At least this way, you'll know what you're walking into. He got in his vehicle and drove away, leaving Lance and Isabel standing alone in the growing darkness. Isabel looked at Lance. He's right. We're going to do this, aren't we? The signal pulses in. Lance checked his watch. 3 hours and 17 minutes. Then we should get into position. They returned to the patrol vehicle and began the drive back toward Range Road 17. Neither of them spoke. Both of them knew they'd just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. As they drove, Isabel's EMF detector began to beep again. Slowly at first, then faster. It's starting, she said. The pulse is building. Lance gripped the steering wheel tighter. Where do you want to do this? Same spot as before, where it happened the first time. They reached Range Road 17 just as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The desert transformed in the twilight, familiar landmarks becoming strange and alien. Lance drove slowly, counting the distance from Delta 7, trying to remember exactly where they'd stopped before. And then he felt it, a pressure in the air, a sense of anticipation. Here, he said, and stopped the vehicle. They got out and stood in the middle of the empty road. The sky was deep purple, stars beginning to emerge. The EMF detector in Isabel's hands was chirping frantically now. Signal's peaking, she said. Any minute now. Lance looked up at the sky and waited. The radio in the vehicle went silent first. Then the dash lights flickered and died. The engine sputtered once, then quit. Complete silence settled over the desert. Isabel grabbed Lance's arm. There. 3 white lights appeared on the eastern horizon, just like before. They rose slowly into the sky, arranging themselves in a perfect triangle. And then they began to move toward Range Road 17. toward Lance and Isabel. "Should we get back in the vehicle?" Isabel asked, her voice shaking. "Won't matter. The engine's dead anyway." The lights drew closer. 1,000 feet away, 500, 200. And then the craft materialized around them. Massive, dark, silent. It stopped directly overhead, hovering at 50 feet. The dust began to rise. The blue light poured down. And this time, Lance didn't fight it. He looked up into the light, feeling the pull, the pressure, the sense of being unmade and remade simultaneously. Beside him, Isabel was crying, or laughing, or both. The light intensified, and then everything changed. Lance opened his eyes, and he wasn't on Range Road 17 anymore. He was standing in a room that wasn't a room. The walls, if they could be called walls, seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. They were solid but transparent, present but absent, shifting between states of matter in ways that hurt to look at. Isabel stood next to him. She was staring at her hands, turning them over, watching as patterns of light rippled across her skin like water. "Where are we?" she whispered. "I don't know." But even as he said it, Lance realized he did know. They were inside the craft, inside the thing that had been hovering over Range Road 17 for decades. The space around them pulsed with a low-frequency hum that he felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears. It was the same frequency Isabel had detected on her instruments. The 72-hour pulse. The beacon. A doorway appeared in the wall, not opening, just suddenly existing where it hadn't existed before. Something moved through it. Lance's first instinct was to run, but his body wouldn't respond. He stood frozen, watching as the entity approached. It was tall, maybe 9 feet, and vaguely humanoid in shape. But the proportions were wrong. The limbs too long, the torso too narrow, and the skin, if it was skin, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The head was the most disturbing part. Smooth and featureless except for 2 large, dark eyes that weren't really eyes. They were more like windows, apertures into somewhere else. The entity stopped 10 feet away and regarded them with an attention that felt like pressure. Then it spoke, not with words, not with sound, but directly into Lance's mind, the concepts appearing fully formed in his consciousness. "You have returned." Lance tried to speak and found his voice worked. "You brought us here before, 3 nights ago. Correction. We brought you here 72 cycles ago, and 72 cycles before that, and 72 cycles before that. That's not possible. We would remember. You remember what we allow you to remember." Isabel found her voice. How many times have you taken us?" The entity tilted its head in a gesture that might have been curiosity. "This question is irrelevant. Time is not linear. Causality is not sequential. You exist in multiple states simultaneously." "I don't understand." "We are aware." Another entity emerged from the doorway, then another. Soon there were 6 of them, arranged in a semicircle around Lance and Isabel. The first entity continued speaking, its thoughts pressing into Lance's mind like cold fingers. "You have been selected. Your species has been selected. We have been monitoring your development since you achieved technological self-awareness." "Why?" Lance asked. "Because you are approaching a threshold. A point of no return. You will either transcend or destroy yourselves. We are here to observe which path you choose." "You're just watching? You're not going to help us?" "Help is interference. Interference disrupts natural development. We observe. We document. We do not intervene." Isabel stepped forward, anger overriding her fear. Then why take us? Why erase our memories? Why terrorize people for 70 years? You misunderstand. We do not take. We invite. You came to us. You came to Range Road 17 because some part of you remembers being here. Some part of you wants to return. That's not true. Is it not? Then why did you drive down that road when you knew it was dangerous? Why did you return tonight when you could have stayed away? Lance felt something crack inside his mind. A wall, a barrier, and behind it, memories. Memories of being here before, not 3 nights ago, but years ago. When he first arrived at the test site, they had brought him here, shown him things, explained things, and then sent him back with the memories locked away. But the knowledge remained, buried, dormant, influencing his decisions without his conscious awareness. You've been controlling us, he said. Incorrect. We have been guiding you, nudging you, preparing you. For what? For the moment when your species must choose, and that moment approaches rapidly. The entity moved closer. Lance could see his reflection in those dark, endless eyes. But it wasn't just his reflection. It was thousands of reflections. Millions. All the versions of himself that existed across different timelines, different possibilities, different choices. You are one of the anchors, the entity said. One of the points of connection between your kind and ours. When the threshold is reached, you will remember everything, and you will help your people understand what they must do. I don't want this. Your wants are irrelevant. Your purpose is predetermined. Isabel was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Please, just let us go. We won't tell anyone. We'll forget everything. You cannot forget. The knowledge is part of you now. It always has been. The entity gestured, and the room shifted. The walls fell away, and suddenly Lance and Isabel were looking out at something vast and impossible. They were above Earth, far above. But not in space, in somewhere else. A place where the planet looked different, layered, multidimensional, existing in multiple states at once. This is your world as we see it, the entity explained. Not just the physical matter, but the probability fields, the potential outcomes, the branching paths. Lance could see them. Lines of light spreading from Earth like roots or veins, each one representing a different future. Some lines were bright and strong, others were dim and withering, and some terminated abruptly in darkness. Your species is at a junction point, the entity continued. Multiple timelines converge here. What you do in the next several cycles will determine which path you follow. What are we supposed to do? That is for you to discover. We can only show you the map. You must choose the destination. The vision collapsed. They were back in the room that wasn't a room. Lance felt exhausted, like his mind had been running a marathon. Beside him, Isabel had slumped to the floor, her head in her hands. The entity watched them with what might have been compassion, or might have been complete indifference. It was impossible to tell. You will return now, it said. You will remember what you need to remember, and you will forget what you must forget. In time, when the threshold approaches, you will be called again. I don't want to come back, Lance said. Your wants remain irrelevant. The blue light intensified. Lance felt that familiar pulling sensation, the sense of being disassembled at a molecular level. The last thing he heard before the light consumed him completely was the entity's voice in his mind. You have always been here. You will always return. This is your purpose. This is your fate. And then nothing. Lance woke up on the ground next to the patrol vehicle. His head was pounding. His mouth tasted like copper. He sat up slowly, blinking in the harsh sunlight. Sunlight. It had been night. It had been dark. They'd been standing on Range Road 17 waiting for the craft. Now it was morning. Full daylight. The desert baking under a merciless sun. "Isabel?" She was lying a few feet away, curled into a fetal position. As he spoke her name, she stirred and opened her eyes. "What happened?" she asked groggily. "I don't know." But that wasn't true. He did know. He remembered everything. The craft, the entities, the impossible room, the vision of Earth existing in multiple states. He could see from Isabel's face that she remembered too. They sat in silence for several minutes, neither of them able to process what they'd experienced. Finally, Isabel spoke. "How long were we gone?" Lance checked his watch. It was dead, the display blank. He looked at the vehicle. The engine was off, but when he tried the ignition, it started immediately. The radio crackled to life. "Patrol 7, this is Base. Please respond." Lance grabbed the receiver. "Base, this is Patrol 7. We're on Range Road 17. We had an emergency situation." "Copy that, 7. We've been trying to reach you for 11 hours. What's your status?" 11 hours. They'd been gone all night. "We're operational now, Base. Vehicle malfunction. We'll be returning shortly." "Roger, 7. Report to command immediately upon return." Lance set the receiver down and looked at Isabel. She was staring at her hands, at the faint patterns of light that seemed to ripple across her skin. "Did you see that?" she asked. "The light on my hands." "Yes." "Is it still there?" Lance looked closely. In the harsh daylight, her skin looked normal, but if he unfocused his eyes slightly, he could see it, a subtle shimmer, like heat waves on asphalt. "It's there," he said. "What did they do to us?" "I don't know, but I don't think it's over." They drove back to base in silence. Both of them were trying to organize their thoughts, trying to make sense of what they'd experienced. But it was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The more they focused on the memories, the more they slipped away. By the time they reached the main gate, Lance could barely remember the entities' faces. By the time they parked, the details of the room had become fuzzy and indistinct. But the core memory remained, the certainty that they'd been taken, that they'd been shown something important, that they had a purpose they didn't understand. Command was waiting for them. Not their usual supervisors, but men in suits, federal agents, maybe, or something else. They were separated immediately. Lance was taken to one interrogation room, Isabel to another. The man questioning Lance was in his 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of face that revealed nothing. "Tell me what happened last night," he said without preamble. Lance considered lying, considered making up a story about vehicle trouble and getting lost. But something told him it wouldn't matter. They already knew. "We saw something," Lance said. "On Range Road 17. A craft. It took us." The man's expression didn't change. "Describe the craft." Lance did. Described the triangular shape, the lights, the silent movement. Described the blue glow and the sense of time distortion. The man took notes, asked follow-up questions, showed Lance photographs of various aircraft and asked if any matched what he'd seen. None did. After 2 hours, the man closed his notebook and stood up. "You're going to sign some documents," he said. "Non-disclosure agreements, security protocols, standard procedure for anyone who witnesses classified activity." Classified activity? That's what the documents will say. But we both know that's not what it was. The man looked at Lance for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "What you think you saw and what actually happened are not necessarily the same thing. The human mind is unreliable. Memory is malleable. Stress and fatigue can create vivid hallucinations. We both saw it. The same thing. That's not hallucination. Shared hallucination. It happens more often than you'd think, especially in high-stress environments. I don't believe you. Your belief is irrelevant. What matters is that you sign the documents and you never speak about this again. To anyone, including each other. And if we don't? The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you'll find that your security clearances have been revoked. Your employment here will be terminated, and depending on how much you've compromised national security, you may face criminal charges. He slid a stack of papers across the table. Sign. Lance signed. He didn't read the documents. Didn't matter what they said. He was trapped, and they both knew it. When he was finally released, he found Isabel waiting in the hallway outside. She looked shaken but composed. "You okay?" he asked. "No, you?" "No." They walked outside together. The sun was setting again. Another day disappearing into the Nevada desert. They'd lost almost 24 hours. "They told me it didn't happen," Isabel said quietly. "That we experienced a shared delusion caused by equipment malfunction. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a defective ventilation system in the vehicle. They told me hallucination, stress-induced. Do you believe them?" Lance thought about the entities, about the room that existed in multiple dimensions, about the vision of Earth branching into infinite possible futures. "No," he said. "I don't believe them, but I'm going to pretend I do." "Why?" "Because the alternative is worse. Because if we keep pushing, they'll bury us, reassign us, make us disappear." Isabel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm putting in for a transfer, getting out of here. Where will you go?" "Anywhere but here, somewhere I can think. Somewhere I can figure out what they did to us. They said we're anchors, connection points. I remember." "You think it's true?" "I don't know, but I know they're not finished with us. They said we'd be called again." Lance looked up at the darkening sky. Stars were beginning to appear, thousands of them, infinite and cold. "Then I guess we wait," he said. Isabel left 2 weeks later. A job offer in California, a university research position, a chance to start over. Lance stayed. He couldn't explain why. Something kept him at the test site. Some sense that his purpose, whatever it was, required him to be here. He continued his patrols, drove Range Road 17 on schedule, radioed in on time, played the part of a good security officer who'd seen nothing unusual. But he couldn't shake the memories. They'd faded, yes, become dreamlike and fragmented. But they never disappeared completely. And every 72 hours at exactly 9:17 p.m., he would feel it. The pulse, the beacon, a sense of being watched, being called, being reminded that he was part of something larger than himself. 6 months after that night on Range Road 17, Lance was driving his patrol route when he saw Rodriguez again. The older man was standing beside his vehicle at checkpoint Delta 7, smoking a cigarette in the twilight. Lance pulled up beside him. "Thought you quit." "I did, started again." Rodriguez took a long drag and exhaled slowly. "Can't seem to kick it. Stress, you know." "Yeah. You been back to 17? "Every week, part of my route." "Seen anything?" "Nothing." Rodriguez nodded. "It's like that sometimes. They go quiet for a while, then they come back. Always come back." "You ever figure out why they keep coming here?" "Nope, and I stopped trying. Figured if they wanted us to know, they'd tell us. They told us we're anchors, connection points." Rodriguez looked at him sharply. "They told you that? You remember. You just said you don't." The older man smiled grimly. Memory's a funny thing. Sometimes I remember everything. Sometimes I remember nothing. It comes and goes. Does it get easier? No, but you get used to it. Or you don't, and you end up like some of the others. Like Brennan, like Martinez, like all the others who got too close and couldn't come back from it. Rodriguez finished his cigarette and ground it out under his boot. You want my advice? Sure. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to understand. Just accept that you're part of something bigger and let it happen. Fighting only makes it worse. I can't do that. Then you'll suffer. Your choice. He got back in his vehicle and drove away, leaving Lance alone with his thoughts and the gathering darkness. That night, Lance wrote a letter. He didn't know who he was writing it to. Future researchers, maybe. Or future versions of himself. Or just the void, documenting something that might otherwise be lost. He wrote about Range Road 17, about the craft and the entities, about the missing time and the vision of Earth as a probability field, about the sense that humanity was approaching some kind of threshold. He sealed the letter in an envelope and locked it in his personal safe. And then he waited. The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. Lance continued his patrols. Isabel sent occasional emails from California, carefully worded, revealing nothing, but hinting at continued research, continued questions. And every 72 hours the pulse came. Lance could feel it now without instruments. A flutter in his chest, a pressure in his head, a certainty that somewhere out in the desert, the beacon was active. 5 years after that first night on Range Road 17, Lance was promoted to senior security officer. He trained new recruits, showed them the routes, warned them about the hazards. But he never warned them about Range Road 17, never mentioned the lights or the craft or the missing time. Because he'd learned what Rodriguez had learned, what generations of security officers had learned before him. Some things can't be explained. Some things can't be prevented. Some things just are, and you either accept them or you break. Lance chose acceptance. He drove Range Road 17 every week, watched the sky, felt the pulse, and sometimes, late at night, he would dream of the room that wasn't a room, of the entities with their infinite eyes, of the vision of Earth branching into countless possible futures. And he would wake with the certainty that someday, maybe soon, maybe not for decades, they would call him back. The anchors would be activated. The threshold would be reached. And whatever purpose they'd prepared him for would finally be revealed. Until then, he would wait. He would watch. And he would remember, even as the memories faded, that he'd been chosen for something. Something important. Something that transcended his understanding. The desert held its secrets. The sky held its watchers. And Lance Porter, senior security officer at Nevada Test Range, held his silence. Because some truths are too large to speak. Some experiences too profound to share. Some purposes too mysterious to question. Range Road 17 remained on the patrol schedule. The beacon continued to pulse every 72 hours. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something ancient and unknowable continued its watch over humanity, waiting for the moment when we would finally choose our path. The road stretched endlessly into the desert, empty, silent, waiting. The night Elena Ross discovered the pattern, the sky above Tonopah was black as tar. No moon, no clouds, just an endless void punctuated by stars that seemed too far away to matter. She'd been reviewing old test reports for 3 hours, cross-referencing radiation surveys from the 60s with current geological data. boring work, the kind that paid well because nobody else wanted to do it. Elena didn't mind. She liked the solitude of the research station, liked the way numbers made sense when nothing else did. She was 28, had a master's in geophysics, and had been working at the Nevada test range for 6 months. Most of that time had been spent in a cinder block building 15 miles south of Tonopah, cataloging decades of environmental data that the government wanted organized before the next round of budget hearings. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago. She took a sip anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste, and returned her attention to the report dated August 1967. That's when she saw it through the window. A light in the sky, bright white, hanging motionless above the distant mountains. Elena watched it for a moment, assuming it was a plane. But it didn't move, didn't blink. Just stayed there, fixed in place like someone had hung a lantern in the middle of the desert night. She turned back to her work. Probably a satellite. Or Venus. People were always mistaking Venus for UFOs. 10 minutes later, she glanced up again. The light was gone. Elena shrugged and kept reading. But something nagged at her. Something about the position of that light. The exact spot in the sky where it had appeared. She pulled up the astronomical data for the night. Venus wasn't visible from this latitude. No satellites were scheduled to pass overhead, and commercial flight paths didn't go anywhere near this restricted airspace. She made a note in her log. 22:47 hours. Unidentified light observed bearing 287 degrees, elevation approximately 40 degrees. Duration unknown. No identification. Then she went back to her reports. 20 minutes later, it happened again. Same spot, same light, appearing suddenly, hanging motionless, then vanishing. This time, Elena grabbed her camera and ran outside. The desert air was cold, dropping into the 40s now that the sun had been down for hours. She raised the camera and aimed it at the point where the light had been. Waited. Nothing. She stood there for 5 minutes, shivering, staring at empty sky. Finally, gave up and went back inside. But as she reached the door, the light appeared again. Same location, same intensity. Elena spun around and raised her camera, but her hands were shaking from the cold and excitement. She managed to fire off 3 shots before the light vanished once more. She checked the camera's display. The photos showed nothing but stars. The light hadn't registered on the sensor. That should have been her first clue that something was wrong. Instead, Elena went back inside and spent the next hour trying to rationalize what she'd seen. Atmospheric reflection. Heat mirage, though there was no heat. A drone, though drones didn't hang motionless at that altitude without navigation lights. By midnight, she'd convinced herself it was nothing. A trick of tired eyes and too much coffee. She locked up the research station and headed to her vehicle. The drive back to the main facility took 30 minutes along a dirt road that barely qualified as maintained. Elena's truck rattled and bounced over washboard ruts, headlights cutting weak yellow paths through the darkness. She was 10 minutes from base when the radio died. Not static, not fade out. Just sudden, complete silence. Elena tapped the unit. Tried different channels, nothing. Great, she muttered, just great. The road ahead curved around a low ridge. As Elena followed the turn, she saw something that made her foot ease off the accelerator. Tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting off the main road and heading west into open desert. She slowed to a crawl and looked at the tracks more closely. They were deep, heavy, not from a light utility vehicle like hers. Something bigger. Military, maybe. But what would military vehicles be doing out here at midnight? Elena considered following the tracks, then decided against it. She was a civilian contractor. Poking around in the desert after dark was a good way to get fired. Or worse. She continued toward base, but the unease stayed with her. When she finally reached the main facility, the gate guard waved her through without comment. Elena parked in the small lot reserved for contractors and sat in her truck for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, the light in the sky, the radio dying, the fresh tire tracks. Individually, none of it meant anything. But together, it felt like pieces of something larger, something she couldn't quite see yet. She gathered her things and headed to her quarters, a small prefab unit she shared with 2 other contractors who worked different shifts. The place was empty when she arrived. She made a fresh pot of coffee, her 4th of the night, and sat at the small desk by the window. Outside, the base was quiet. A few security lights cast harsh white pools on the asphalt. Beyond the fence line, the desert was a wall of darkness. Elena opened her laptop and pulled up her notes from the evening. 3 sightings, same location, same behavior, approximately 20 minutes apart. She created a simple timeline. 20 to 47 hours. Light appears. 2,307 hours. Light appears 2,327 hours. Light appears 20-minute intervals. Precise, regular. That ruled out random phenomena. Whatever this was, it followed a pattern. Elena checked the astronomical databases again. Confirmed there were no satellites, no known aircraft, no celestial bodies that could explain what she'd seen. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. A pattern meant intelligence, intent, something or someone producing the light deliberately, on a schedule. Her rational mind resisted the conclusion, but the data didn't lie. She was about to close her laptop when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You saw it too?" Elena stared at the message. Didn't recognize the number. Didn't respond. Another message appeared. "The light, same spot, 3 times. I was watching from checkpoint Delta 3. Elena's pulse quickened. Someone else had seen it. Someone on base. She texted back, "Who is this?" "Dean Foster, Security Patrol. We should talk." Elena hesitated. She didn't know anyone named Dean Foster. Didn't know if she should trust someone texting her from an unknown number in the middle of the night. But whoever this was, they'd seen the same thing she had. That couldn't be coincidence. "Where?" she typed. "Maintenance building, 20 minutes. The maintenance building was on the south side of the base, near the vehicle depot. Elena had been there once, dropping off paperwork. It was a good place to meet without drawing attention. She grabbed her jacket and headed out. The walk took 10 minutes. The night was cold and still, no wind, just the crunch of her boots on gravel. Overhead, the stars looked different than they had earlier. Sharper. Closer. Like the sky had moved down a few feet. The maintenance building was dark except for a single light above the side door. Elena approached carefully, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The door opened before she could knock. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, tall, wearing the standard base security uniform. His face was drawn, eyes red like he hadn't slept. "Elena Ross, that's me. Dean Foster." He extended a hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. "Thanks for coming. You said you saw the light. 3 times, same as you." He glanced around, then gestured to the building. "Let's talk inside." The maintenance bay was cavernous, filled with trucks and equipment in various states of repair. Dean led her to a small office in the back corner and closed the door. "How did you get my number?" Elena asked. "Base directory. You're one of only 5 contractors on site tonight. Took a guess. And you just happened to be watching the same part of the sky I was." Dean pulled out a small notebook and flipped it open. "I've been tracking unusual sightings for 2 years. Logging times, locations, descriptions. Tonight was different because it was regular. a pattern. He turned the notebook toward her. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, dates, and coordinates. "You've seen this before?" Elena asked. "Not like this. Usually it's random. A light here, a strange object there. But tonight, 3 appearances. Same spot, 20 minutes apart. That's not random, that's intentional." Elena sat down in the desk chair. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're a scientist. You deal with data, evidence. I'm just a security guard. No one listens to security guards when they talk about lights in the sky. No one listens to geophysicists either." Dean smiled grimly. "Then, we're perfect for each other." He flipped to a new page in his notebook and showed her a map, hand-drawn, marked with dozens of red X's scattered across the Nevada test range. "These are all the sightings I've documented. Most are single events, but there are clusters, areas where activity is higher." Elena studied the map. The highest concentration of marks was west of Tonopah, in the restricted zones where old nuclear tests had been conducted. "Why west?" she asked. "I don't know, but whatever's out there, it keeps coming back." "You think it's extraterrestrial?" Dean closed the notebook. "I think it's something we don't understand. Whether it's from space or from some black budget program we're not supposed to know about, I can't say, but it's real and it's persistent." Elena thought about the light, about the radio dying, about the fresh tire tracks heading west. "I saw tire tracks tonight," she said. "After the lights appeared, big vehicle heading west off the main road." Dean's expression darkened. "Where?" "About 10 miles south of here, near the junction with the old service road. That's near checkpoint Delta 7. That's my route." He checked his watch. "I'm scheduled to patrol there tomorrow night. You want to come along?" "Is that allowed?" "Probably not. But I have a feeling we're going to see something. And I'd rather have a witness." Elena knew she should say no. Knew she should stick to her research and avoid getting involved in something that could cost her job. But the light in the sky had been real. The pattern had been real. And somewhere in her gut, she knew this was connected to something bigger than radiation surveys and budget reports. "What time?" she asked. 2100 hours. Meet me at the gate." Dean Foster left the maintenance building first, waiting 5 minutes before Elena followed. They couldn't be seen together. Base security might ask questions. Elena walked back to her quarters through the cold desert night, her mind racing. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been a discrepancy in a 1967 test report. Now, she was planning to patrol restricted territory with a security guard who believed something was operating in the desert west of Tonopah. She should have been scared, should have been skeptical. Instead, she was exhilarated. For the first time in months, maybe years, Elena felt like she was on the edge of discovering something that mattered. Something real. The light had appeared 3 times, a pattern, and patterns meant something was trying to communicate. The next day dragged like broken glass. Elena forced herself through the routine, reviewing reports, cross-referencing data, pretending everything was normal. But her mind kept returning to the light, to Dean's notebook filled with sightings, to the question that had lodged itself in her brain and wouldn't leave. What was out there? At 1800 hours, she filed her daily report and left the research station. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that looked too vivid to be real. Elena drove back to base, grabbed a quick dinner from the commissary, and returned to her quarters. She had 3 hours before meeting Dean. Elena spent the time reviewing her photos from the previous night. The 3 images showed nothing but stars, no trace of the light she'd clearly seen with her naked eye. She adjusted the exposure settings, cranked up the contrast, Used every photo manipulation technique she knew. Nothing. It was as if the light existed outside the normal electromagnetic spectrum, visible to the human eye, but invisible to cameras. That should have been impossible. Elena made notes, documented everything, saved the files to 3 separate locations. If something happened tonight, she wanted a record. At 20:45 hours, she put on dark clothing, jeans, a black jacket, boots, and grabbed a small backpack. Inside, flashlight, water, her phone, and a portable voice recorder. If she saw something, she wanted evidence. The walk to the main gate took 15 minutes. Dean was waiting in a patrol vehicle, engine idling. He pushed open the passenger door as she approached. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." They signed out at the gate. Routine perimeter patrol. Estimated return time 0100 hours. The guard barely looked at them. Dean pulled onto the main road and headed south. They drove in silence for the first 10 miles. The darkness outside was complete, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the void. Elena could see her reflection in the passenger window, ghostly and indistinct. "You ever think about what it means if it's real?" Dean asked suddenly. What means? All of this. The lights, the sightings. If it's not ours, if it's something else, then we're not alone. Right, and if we're not alone, then everything changes. Every assumption we make about our place in the universe, our importance, our future, all of it gets rewritten. Elena watched the darkness sliding past. "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "Every night for 2 years." Dean's hands tightened on the wheel. "You know what the hardest part is? Not the sightings, not the lights or the objects, it's the silence." "What do you mean?" "I've reported every single incident, filed official logs, followed procedure, and every single time nothing happens. No investigation, no follow-up, just silence. Like the reports disappear into a void. Maybe there's no pattern, maybe each incident is just random. You don't believe that. If you did, you wouldn't be here." He was right. Elena didn't believe that. The pattern was too clear. 3 lights, 20 minutes apart, same location. That wasn't random. They reached the junction where Elena had seen the tire tracks. Dean slowed and turned on the spotlight mounted to the vehicle, sweeping it across the desert. The tracks were still there, deep impressions in the sand, heading west. "Big vehicle," Dean muttered. "Heavy. Could be military transport. Or something else. Or something else." He followed the tracks, driving slowly. The patrol vehicle lurched and bounced over uneven terrain. Rocks scraped the undercarriage. Elena gripped the door handle as they navigated a steep wash. They drove for 20 minutes, following the tracks as they wound between low hills and dry creek beds. The landscape was harsh, alien, like the surface of a dead planet. Then the tracks stopped, just ended, in the middle of a flat stretch of hardpan. Dean killed the engine and got out. Elena followed. They stood in the silence looking at the ground. The tracks were clear up to a certain point, and then nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed earth. "That's not possible," Elena said. Dean walked the perimeter, shining his flashlight across the ground. "Tracks don't just vanish. These did." Elena knelt and examined the last visible impression. The tread pattern was standard military issue, nothing exotic, but the depth suggested a vehicle weighing several tons, something that heavy didn't just float away. She pulled out her phone and took photos from multiple angles, documenting everything. Dean did the same, his flashlight beam sweeping methodically across the scene. "Wait," he said. Elena looked up. Dean was pointing at the ground 20 feet beyond where the tracks ended. She walked over. In the beam of his flashlight, she could see a faint outline. Circular. maybe 30 feet in diameter. The sand inside the circle was compressed, packed down harder than the surrounding earth. "What is that?" she whispered. "A landing site, or a hover zone. Something was here, something big enough and heavy enough to compress the ground." Elena ran her fingers across the surface. The texture was different, smoother, almost glassy. "This was exposed to heat," she said. "Intense heat. The sand is partially fused." Dean's radio crackled. Both of them jumped. A voice came through, distorted by static. "Patrol 4, report status." Dean grabbed the radio. "Patrol 4, all clear. Conducting routine sweep." "Roger. Patrol 4, continue." The radio went silent. Dean looked at Elena. "We should go." "Wait. Let me take more photos." She spent 5 minutes documenting the circle, measuring its dimensions, collecting a small sample of the fused sand. Dean stood watch, scanning the darkness with his flashlight. As Elena finished, she noticed something else. Marks on the ground at regular intervals around the circle's edge. 4 of them, evenly spaced, each about 2 feet across. "Landing gear," she said. Dean came over. He crouched next to one of the marks and traced its outline with his fingers. The impression was deep, precise. Whatever it was here recently, within the last day or so. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. They were standing in a landing site. Something had been here. Something that left no tracks when it departed. Something that generated enough heat to fuse sand. Dean's radio crackled again. This time, no voice came through. Just a sound, low frequency, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Dean grabbed the radio and turned down the volume, but the sound continued. He switched channels. The sound remained. "That's not normal," he said. "Turn it off." Dean hit the power button. The radio went silent. But then Elena's phone vibrated. She pulled it out. The screen showed an incoming call from an unknown number. She answered. "Hello?" Silence, then the same sound they'd heard on the radio. Low. Rhythmic. Wrong. Elena ended the call. Her phone immediately began recording. The voice memo app had activated on its own. She tried to stop it. The app wouldn't close. The recording counter kept climbing. "Dean, my radio's on again. I didn't turn it on." Both devices were active, both producing the same low-frequency sound. Elena felt pressure building in her head, behind her eyes. The sound changed, modulated, and in the modulation a pattern emerged. Not random, not static. A word. Close. Elena stared at her phone. The voice memo app was still recording. The waveform on the screen showed clear, deliberate peaks. The word repeated, "Close, close, close." Dean dropped his radio. It hit the ground and the sound stopped. Elena's phone went dark. The recording app finally closing. They stood in the sudden silence, both of them breathing hard. "What the hell was that?" Dean asked. Elena's hands were shaking. She forced herself to think, to analyze. The devices had activated remotely. The sound had been modulated to form language. Someone, or something, was communicating with them, and the message was clear, close. As in, they were close to something, or close should stop, close should leave. "We need to go," Elena said. "Now." They ran back to the vehicle. Dean started the engine and turned around, heading back toward the main road. Elena kept checking behind them, expecting to see lights or movement, but the desert remained dark and empty. They'd driven for 10 minutes when Dean spoke again. The recording. "Did your phone save it?" Elena checked. The voice memo app showed a new file, timestamp matching the incident. She hit play, static, then the low-frequency sound, then, clear as day, Close. She played it again. Same result. We have evidence, decide here. This proves something communicated with us. Evidence of what? A radio malfunction? Both our devices at once, independently producing the same sound. That's not malfunction, that's deliberate. Dean's jaw clenched. If we report this, they'll bury it. Same as every other incident. We'll get laughed off base or transferred somewhere we can't cause problems. Then we don't report it, not yet. We gather more evidence first. How? Elena thought about the pattern. 3 lights, 20 minutes apart. Regular intervals. Predictable. We go back tomorrow night, she said, to the research station. We watch for the light again. And this time we document everything. Dean was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. Okay, but if we do this, we do it right. Cameras, recorders, the works. And we don't tell anyone. Agreed. They reached the main road and turned north toward the base. Elena looked at her phone, at the recording of the voice saying close. She transferred the file to her cloud storage, backed it up, sent a copy to her personal email. Whatever this was, she wasn't going to lose it. Dean dropped her off at the residential area and continued to the security office to log the end of his patrol. Elena walked to her quarters, every nerve on edge. Inside, she locked the door and sat at her desk, opened her laptop, started organizing everything. Photos, recordings, notes, timestamps. She worked for 2 hours, building a database of evidence. The light sightings, the tire tracks, the landing site, the radio communication. Each piece individually could be explained away. But together they formed a picture. Something was operating in the desert west of Tonopah. Something with technology advanced enough to leave landing sites without tracks, to communicate through electronic devices remotely, to maintain regular patterns of appearance. And it had just told them they were getting close. Elena leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. Her career could end if she pursued this. She could be fired, blacklisted, labeled as unstable. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen. Pretending the evidence didn't exist. She'd become a scientist because she wanted to understand the world, wanted to find truth in data. And right now, the data was screaming at her that something extraordinary was happening. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dean. I checked the duty logs. Tomorrow night, no other patrols are scheduled near the research station. We'll have the area to ourselves. Elena typed back, Good. I'll set up equipment during the day. Meet me there at 2200 hours. Roger that. She set down her phone and looked out the window. The base was quiet, most personnel asleep. Beyond the fence line, the desert stretched into infinity, holding its secrets under a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there something was waiting. And tomorrow night, Elena intended to find it. Elena spent the next day preparing. She requisitioned 3 trail cameras from the equipment depot, claiming she needed them for wildlife monitoring near geological survey points. The clerk didn't question it. She tested each camera, checked the batteries, formatted the memory cards, set them to record continuously with motion detection backup. Whatever happened tonight, she'd have visual documentation. At 1700 hours, she loaded the equipment into her truck and drove to the research station. The building was empty, as it usually was in the evenings. Elena set up the cameras at strategic points around the perimeter, angled to capture different sections of sky. Inside, she positioned her laptop on the desk near the window and launched recording software that would capture screenshots every 5 seconds. She set up her portable voice recorder, checked the levels, left it running. By 2000 hours, everything was ready. Elena made coffee and waited. The sun set. Darkness came quickly, like someone had thrown a switch. Elena sat at her desk, watching the sky, her eyes already adjusting to the dim starlight. At 2145 hours, headlights approached. Dean's patrol vehicle pulled up outside. He got out carrying his own equipment, a high-quality camera with a telephoto lens, a handheld radio scanner, and what looked like a military-grade night vision scope. "Did you steal that?" Elena asked, nodding at the scope. "Borrowed, from storage. I'll return it tomorrow." They set up inside, positioning equipment to cover maximum viewing area. Dean mounted his camera on a tripod and aimed it at the section of sky where the light had appeared before. "If the pattern holds," Elena said, "first appearance should be around 2247 hours, 23 minutes. They waited in silence. Elena sipped coffee that had already gone cold. Dean checked his camera settings repeatedly, nervous energy manifesting in constant small adjustments. At 2240 hours, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't look." She showed it to Dean. His face went pale. "Who sent that?" "I don't know." Another text. "Leave now. This is your only warning." Elena's hands were shaking. Someone knew they were here. Someone knew what they were planning. "We should go," Dean said. "No. We came here for answers. We're staying." "Elena, I'm staying. You can leave if you want." Dean looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to his camera. "If we die, this was a stupid decision." "Noted." 27 hours arrived. Nothing happened. They waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. At 22:53, Dean spoke. Maybe whoever sent those texts scared it off. Maybe the light appeared. Same location, same intensity, hanging motionless in the sky like a burning hole in reality. "Camera," Elena whispered. Dean was already firing off shots, the rapid click of the shutter the only sound in the room. Elena grabbed her voice recorder. 2253 hours, light visible, bearing 287 degrees, elevation approximately 40 degrees, appearance consistent with previous observations, no sound, no movement. The light hung there for 30 seconds. Then it began to move. Not across the sky, down. It descended slowly, deliberately, maintaining its intensity. As it dropped below the mountain ridgeline, Elena could see it was illuminating the terrain below, casting sharp shadows across the rocks. "It's landing," Dean said. "Or hovering. Get the scope." Dean grabbed the night vision scope and aimed it toward the light. After a moment, he passed it to Elena. Through the scope, the light was almost too bright to look at. But around the edges, Elena could see something. A shape. Dark. Angular. The light wasn't coming from nothing, it was coming from an object. "I see structure," she said. "Geometric. It's not a natural phenomenon." The radio scanner on the desk suddenly activated, cycling through frequencies without input. Static burst from the speaker, then that familiar low sound, the breathing pattern they'd heard before. Elena grabbed her voice recorder and held it near the scanner. The sound modulated, changed, and again a word emerged. "Stop." Dean and Elena locked eyes. "It knows we're recording," Dean said. "Or it knows we're watching." The scanner frequency jumped. The voice changed, became clearer. "Stop. Leave. Danger." Elena's laptop screen flickered. The recording software showed interference, frames corrupting. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, text after text from unknown numbers. "Stop. Leave now. Danger close." The messages kept coming, dozens of them filling her screen, and then the research station's lights went out. They were plunged into darkness. The only illumination came from the light in the sky and the glow of their electronic devices. Elena's laptop screen showed one final message before going dark. Last warning. "We need to leave," Dean said. His voice was tight, controlled panic barely held in check. "Wait, look." The light in the sky was moving again, not descending, lateral movement, tracing a path across the ridgeline. Elena grabbed the night vision scope and tracked it. As the light moved, she could see the shape more clearly. It was massive, triangular. The light emanated from the underside, but the bulk of the object was dark, nearly invisible against the night sky. "It's huge," she whispered. "Easily the size of a cargo plane." The object completed its traverse and stopped, hovering, and then the light went out. Darkness. Complete and total. Elena strained her eyes, trying to see anything in the starlight. For a moment, nothing. Then her eyes adjusted. The object was still there. She could see it now as a silhouette against the stars, a black triangle blocking out the light of distant suns. And it was closer than before. Much closer. "Dean, I see it." The object was perhaps a mile away. As they watched, it began to rotate slowly, presenting different angles. Silent. No engines, no sound at all. Elena raised the night vision scope again. Through the scope, she could see details. The surface wasn't smooth. It had panels, seams, structures that suggested engineered construction. Not organic, not natural. Made, but not made by humans. The proportions were wrong. The geometry was wrong. Everything about it felt alien in a way that went beyond mere unfamiliarity. Then, lights activated along the object's edge. Not white this time. Blue. Dozens of them, creating a constellation that outlined the craft's full shape. It was enormous. Easily 300 feet across. Dean was taking photos continuously now, the camera's shutter running like a machine gun. Elena kept her voice recorder going, narrating everything she saw. "Object is rotating. Blue lights active along perimeter. Estimated size 300 feet wingspan. No visible propulsion. No sound. Movement is controlled, deliberate. This is not a natural phenomenon. This is a craft." The object completed its rotation and the lights intensified. All of them simultaneously bright enough to illuminate the entire valley. And in that light, Elena saw something that made her breath catch. The ground below the craft. It was moving. The sand and rocks were rising, swirling upward in a spiral pattern, defying gravity. "It's creating some kind of field," she said. "Anti-gravity. It has to be." Dean grabbed the radio scanner. The device was going haywire, frequencies cycling so fast they blurred together. And through the static, voices, multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in a language Elena didn't recognize. The scanner's display showed frequency readings that shouldn't have been possible. Wavelengths that didn't exist on the standard electromagnetic spectrum. "This is beyond our technology," Dean said. "Way beyond." The craft's lights pulsed once, twice. Then all the electronic devices in the research station activated simultaneously. Elena's laptop booted up on its own. The screen filled with text, scrolling too fast to read. Her phone's screen showed camera feeds, but not from her camera, from somewhere else. Aerial views, satellite imagery, views of the research station from above. They were being watched, had been watched. Dean's camera was still firing, but the images on the display weren't what his lens was pointing at. They showed the interior of the research station. Showed Elena and Dean standing at the window. The craft was accessing their devices, controlling them. And then everything stopped. The lights, the sounds, the devices. Complete silence. Complete darkness. Elena's heart hammered. She reached out and found Dean's arm, needing to confirm he was still there. "What just happened?" he whispered. "I don't know." They stood in the darkness for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then the research station's lights came back on. The craft was gone. Elena ran to the window. The sky was empty, the valley dark. Nothing remained except the ordinary Nevada night. She grabbed the night vision scope and scanned desperately. Nothing. The object had vanished completely. "Did we imagine that?" Dean asked. "Check your camera." Dean reviewed the images. Frame after frame showed the craft, the lights, the rotating shape, the blue constellation outlining its structure. "It's here," he said. "All of it. We got it." Elena checked her laptop. The recording software had captured everything. The interference, the text scrolling across the screen, the camera feeds from impossible angles. They had evidence. Undeniable, documented evidence. Her phone buzzed one last time. A final text from an unknown number. "You were warned." Elena saved everything. Backed it up to 3 different cloud services. Copied files to external drives. She wasn't going to lose this data. Dean packed up his equipment in silence. When everything was secured, he looked at Elena. "What do we do now?" "We analyze. We document. We figure out what this means. And then we decide who to tell." They left the research station together. The drive back to base was quiet, both of them processing what they'd witnessed. As they approached the main gate, Dean spoke. "They'll never believe us, even with the evidence." "Maybe, but the evidence exists. That's what matters." "Is it? If no one believes it, if everyone writes it off as fake, does it matter that it's real?" Elena didn't have an answer for that. They signed in at the gate. The guard looked at them strangely. They'd been gone nearly 4 hours, but didn't comment. Dean dropped Elena at the residential area. Before she got out, he grabbed her arm. "Whatever happens next, whatever we decide to do with this, we're in it together, okay?" "Okay." "I mean it. We watch each other's backs. Because if they tried to warn us off, if whoever is behind this doesn't want us seeing what we saw, then we might be in danger." Elena nodded. Agreed. She went to her quarters and spent the next 3 hours organizing the data. Every photo, every recording, every piece of evidence meticulously cataloged and documented. The voice saying, "Stop," the text warnings, the craft rotating in the sky, the manipulation of their devices. All of it was there, recorded, preserved. At 0400 hours, Elena finally allowed herself to sleep. But her dreams were filled with blue lights and warnings she couldn't quite hear. When she woke at 0800, her phone was flooded with messages. Not texts, emails. Dozens of them from addresses she didn't recognize. The subject lines were all the same. "Delete the files." Elena's blood ran cold. She opened one of the emails. "You saw something you weren't meant to see. For your own safety, delete all files related to last night's observation. This is not a request." She checked her cloud storage. The files were still there. Checked the external drives. Still there. But someone knew. Someone knew what they'd recorded. Elena called Dean. He answered on the first ring. "You got the emails too?" she asked. "Yeah, 37 of them, all saying the same thing. Someone's tracking us. Or something. Elena, I think we need to go public with this. If we're already being threatened, we might as well get the evidence out there. And ruin our careers? Get labeled as crazy? Better than disappearing. Better than having an accident." Elena thought about the craft. About the technology it represented. about what it meant for humanity if this was real, if something from beyond Earth was operating in Nevada's restricted airspace. "Give me 24 hours, she said. "Let me put together a package. Photos, audio, analysis, something comprehensive that's harder to dismiss. And then we find someone we trust. A journalist, maybe, or a researcher, someone who can amplify this beyond just us." "Okay, 24 hours. But Elena?" "Yeah? Be careful. Check your car before you drive it. Watch your food. Vary your routines. I know that sounds paranoid, but it doesn't sound paranoid. Not anymore." She hung up and looked at her laptop, at the files that could change everything or destroy her life. The craft had been real. The evidence was real. But in a world where people saw what they wanted to see, where inconvenient truths were buried under layers of denial and ridicule, would anyone care? Elena opened a new document and began to write. A comprehensive report detailing everything they'd witnessed. Objective, scientific, undeniable. If they were going to do this, they were going to do it right. She worked all morning, compiling the evidence into a presentation that even skeptics would have to take seriously. High-resolution photos showing the craft's structure. Audio recordings of the warnings, video of the devices activating on their own. By 1400 hours, she had a complete package. 50 pages of documentation, hundreds of images, audio files, video clips. Everything organized, annotated, sourced. She was about to save the final version when her laptop screen flickered. Text appeared, overwriting her document. "Final warning. Delete now or face consequences." Elena stared at the screen. The text pulsed, growing larger, filling the display. Her hands moved to the keyboard. She could delete it all, go back to her boring job cataloging old test reports, pretend none of this had happened. But the craft had been real. The evidence was real. And if she walked away now, if she let fear dictate her choices, then what was the point of being a scientist? Elena hit a key combination that took a screenshot of the threatening message, added it to her evidence package, saved everything. Her laptop screen went black. Then text appeared again. Mistake. The screen died completely. The laptop wouldn't respond. No power, no lights, dead. But Elena was already uploading files from her phone, already sending the package to multiple email addresses, multiple cloud services, multiple backup locations. If they wanted to silence her, they'd have to do better than killing her laptop. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Hello?" A voice. Mechanical. Synthesized. "Ms. Ross, you have 60 seconds to delete all files and cease your investigation. This is your final opportunity. Who is this? You have 55 seconds. I'm not deleting anything. The evidence exists. People have seen it. You can't bury this. 50 seconds. Do you understand what you're risking? Do you understand what you're hiding? We're not alone. People deserve to know. 45 seconds. Last chance." Elena ended the call, blocked the number. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was solid. She called Dean. "They just threatened me, directly, a phone call. Same here. What do we do? We go public, now, before they can stop us." "How?" Elena thought fast. "Social media. We post everything simultaneously across multiple platforms. Once it's out there, once people have seen it, they can't suppress it. They'll discredit us. Let them try. The evidence speaks for itself." There was a pause. Then Dean said, "Okay, let's do it. Send me the files. I'll start uploading to YouTube and Twitter. You take Facebook and Instagram. We flood every platform at once. Give me 10 minutes to write an introduction. Something that explains what we saw and why it matters. Roger that. 10 minutes. And Elena? Yeah? Thank you. For not backing down, for believing this matters. It does matter, more than anything. She hung up and started typing. A simple, direct statement. My name is Elena Ross. I'm a geophysicist working at Nevada Test Range. 3 days ago, I witnessed something that changed my understanding of reality. What you're about to see is not a hoax. It is not CGI. It is documented evidence of an unidentified craft operating in restricted airspace. I am risking my career and possibly my safety by sharing this. But the truth matters more than my comfort. We are not alone, and we deserve to know. She attached the photos, the recordings, the video files, everything. At exactly 1500 hours, she hit post across 4 different platforms simultaneously. Within 5 minutes, the posts had 1,000 views. Within 10, 10,000. Within 20, they'd been shared across dozens of other accounts, spreading exponentially. Her phone exploded with notifications, comments, questions, accusations of fraud, expressions of amazement, skepticism, and belief colliding in real time. Elena watched the numbers climb. 50,000 views, 100,000. The evidence was out. The world was seeing it. And whatever happened next, at least the truth existed somewhere besides her laptop and Dean's camera. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Miss Ross, this is Colonel Martin with Base Security. You need to come to the administration building immediately. Am I being detained? You are being summoned. There's a difference. But if you don't come voluntarily, we will make it official. I'll be there in 15 minutes. 10. The line went dead. Elena grabbed her backup drives, her phone, everything she needed. She'd known this was coming. They couldn't let her continue working at the facility after going public. But she'd accomplished what she set out to do. The evidence existed. People had seen it. And nothing could erase that. She walked to the administration building in the harsh afternoon sun, her shadow stretching long across the ground. Other base personnel watched her pass, some with curiosity, some with hostility. Inside, Colonel Martin was waiting. Mid-50s, career military, the kind of man who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Sit, he said. Elena sat. You just committed several violations of your security clearance. You disclosed information about facility operations. You made claims that could damage national security. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? I documented an unknown craft operating in restricted airspace. That's not a violation. That's my job as a scientist. Your job is environmental surveying, not UFO hunting. Then what was that object? What was hovering over the valley last night? Colonel Martin's expression didn't change. There was no object. You experienced equipment malfunction and misinterpreted the data. I have photos, video, audio recordings of warnings. That's not equipment malfunction. Those files show nothing. Artifacts of digital corruption. Any expert will tell you the same. Elena pulled out her phone and opened one of the photos. The craft, clear as day, blue lights outlining its structure. She turned the screen toward Martin. This is digital corruption? Martin barely glanced at it. Yes, you're lying. I'm telling you the official position, which is what will stand in any investigation. Thousands of people have seen the evidence. They know it's real. Thousands of people see Bigfoot videos and alien autopsy footage. It doesn't make them real. Martin leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. You will not return to the research station. You will not access facility resources. You will not discuss this matter with anyone. Your security clearance is suspended effective immediately. And if I refuse, then you'll be terminated and prosecuted for violation of the Espionage Act. Your choice." Elena stood up. "I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to keep sharing the evidence. And eventually, enough people will see it that you can't keep lying. Good luck with that." She left the office and walked back to her quarters, escorted by 2 security personnel who made sure she packed her belongings and left the base within the hour. As she drove away from Nevada Test Range for the last time, Elena checked her phone. The posts were still up, still spreading. Millions of views now. The truth was out there. Whether people believed it or not, it existed. And somewhere beyond Tonopah, in the restricted zones where old nuclear ghosts still lingered, something was still operating. Still watching. Still waiting. Elena didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if she'd ever work in her field again. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were not alone. And now the world knew it too. Mara Lewis had been flying test runs over Nevada for 3 years before she saw something that made her question everything she thought she knew about the world. The morning of August 14th started like any other. Pre-flight checklist at 0530 hours in the darkness before dawn. Weather briefing showing clear skies and light winds across the test range. Standard atmospheric data collection run along the restricted zones bordering the facility. Nothing in the mission parameters suggested this would be the day her entire life changed. She was 32 years old, former Air Force pilot with 8 years of service before transitioning to civilian contract work. The government-funded environmental monitoring program paid well and asked few questions. That was the appeal. Fly your routes, collect your data, file your reports, go home. No politics, no drama. Just the clean simplicity of aviation and science. Victor Hale was her mission coordinator, the voice in her headset who monitored her flight path from the ground control station, relayed weather updates, and logged the constant stream of data flowing from her aircraft's sensor array. They'd worked together for 8 months now. Their relationship was purely professional. Brief exchanges of necessary information, no small talk, no personal details shared. That's how Mara preferred it. Keep work separate from life. She climbed into the cockpit of the twin-engine Beechcraft King Air at precisely 0600 hours. The aircraft was equipped with sophisticated atmospheric sensors, radiation detection equipment, ground-penetrating radar, and high-resolution cameras for terrain mapping. Standard environmental survey equipment. Nothing exotic or experimental, just proven technology collecting mundane data about radiation levels, soil composition, and atmospheric conditions in areas that had been used for nuclear testing decades ago. Mara ran through her pre-flight checklist with the muscle memory of thousands of hours in cockpits. Engine start, hydraulic pressure, fuel quantity, electrical systems, communications check. Ground control, this is Survey 12. Radio check, over. Victor's voice came through her headset, crisp and professional as always. Survey 12, ground control. I read you 5 by 5. Weather is clear, winds light and variable out of the northwest at 5 knots. Barometric pressure 299.2. You are cleared for departure on runway 27. Have a good flight. Roger, ground control, survey 12 departing 27. The takeoff was smooth, engines humming with their familiar vibration as Mara climbed through 3,000 feet, then 5, then 8. She leveled off at her cruising altitude and turned south, following the pre-programmed GPS route that would take her along the western edge of the test range for the next 3 hours. Below her, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Brown earth, gray rock, scattered patches of sagebrush that looked black from altitude. No towns, no roads, No signs of human habitation, except for the occasional abandoned structure left over from the Cold War era when this area had been one of the most active nuclear testing sites in the world. Mara had flown this route dozens of times over the past 8 months. She knew every landmark, every dry lake bed, every crater, every fence line marking restricted zones within restricted zones. The monotony of it had become almost meditative. Just her, the aircraft, and the empty desert. The sky above was crystal clear. Not a single cloud. The kind of visibility pilots dream about. She could see 100 miles in every direction. The Spring Mountains to the west, their peaks still holding patches of snow even in August. The Nellis Range to the east. And ahead, nothing but empty sky fading from blue to black as it approached the edge of space. At 06 and 45 hours, she reached waypoint Alpha and initiated the sensor collection sequence. The instruments began their automated routines, recording data streams that would later be analyzed by scientists and engineers who never left their climate-controlled laboratories in Las Vegas or Los Angeles. Ground Control, Survey 12, Waypoint Alpha, beginning primary collection sequence. Roger, Survey 12. Telemetry shows all systems nominal. Data link confirmed. You're looking good up there. Mara settled into the routine of the flight. Monitor the autopilot. Scan the instruments. Watch for traffic even though there was never any traffic this deep into restricted airspace. The only other aircraft that flew out here were military jets conducting training exercises, and they operated at much higher altitudes. The morning sun was climbing higher now, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Mara could see the patterns of ancient lake beds, dried up millennia ago, their ghostly outlines visible only from the air. She'd flown over them so many times they'd become familiar landmarks. The horseshoe-shaped depression near Waypoint Bravo, the perfect circle of Sedan crater where a nuclear device had been detonated underground in 1962, the grid of dirt roads that led to nowhere. That's when she first noticed it. At first, Mara thought it was just a reflection. Sunlight bouncing off something on the ground, maybe a piece of metal debris from an old test, or a vehicle windshield catching the light at just the right angle. But the sun was behind her, still climbing in the eastern sky. Nothing ahead of her aircraft should be reflecting light back toward her. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, thinking maybe it was an artifact of staring at instruments for too long. But when she looked again, it was still there. A shaft of light, perfectly vertical, rising from the desert floor into the sky like an enormous searchlight, except there was no visible source. It simply appeared to emanate from the ground itself, a column of intense white light that seemed to pierce straight through the atmosphere and continue into space. Mara's pulse quickened. She checked her instruments, looking for any indication of what might be causing the phenomenon. All readings were normal. No warnings, no alerts, just routine data collection. She adjusted her sunglasses, thinking maybe the polarization was creating some kind of optical effect. But the light remained unchanged, solid, real, impossible. Ground Control, Survey 12. I'm observing something unusual. Can you confirm any activity in my vicinity? There was a pause. Then Victor's voice with a slight edge of curiosity. Survey 12, define unusual. I have a visual on what appears to be a column of light, bearing approximately 275 degrees from my position, appears to be emanating from ground level, extending vertically into the upper atmosphere. Very bright, very distinct. Another pause, longer this time. Mara could hear the faint sound of keyboard clicking through the radio connection. She imagined Victor pulling up radar displays, checking satellite data, trying to find an explanation for what she was seeing. Survey 12, Ground Control, negative on radar contact. No known activity in that area. No flight operations scheduled. Can you provide more detail on what you're seeing? Mara stared at the light. It wasn't moving. wasn't flickering. Just a perfect column of brilliant white light standing in the desert like some kind of enormous monument. As she continued on her flight path, she was gradually getting closer to it. Ground control, it's a vertical shaft of light. I'd estimate it's approximately 1,000 feet in height, possibly higher. Diameter maybe 50 to 100 feet. Perfectly straight. No apparent source. The light is very intense, almost painful to look at directly. Survey 12, stand by. Let me check with range control. The radio went silent. Mara continued flying, her eyes fixed on the light. Something about it felt wrong. Not just unusual, but fundamentally wrong. It didn't belong in the sky, didn't fit with anything she understood about physics or optics or meteorology. As she drew closer, now maybe 10 miles away, she could see more details. The air around the light shaft was shimmering, distorting, creating visible heat waves despite the fact that it was early morning and the desert hadn't had time to heat up yet. And the ground beneath the light looked different somehow, darker, changed. The distance between her aircraft and the phenomenon was closing steadily. 8 miles now. 7. She could see that the light didn't taper or fade as it rose into the sky. It maintained its consistent diameter from ground to its apex, defying the normal behavior of light beams which typically diverge over distance. Survey 12, ground control. Go ahead, ground control. Range control reports no scheduled activities in that sector. No weapons testing, no ground operations, nothing that would produce the phenomenon you're describing. They're asking if you can maintain visual contact and provide updates. Roger, ground control. Maintaining visual contact. I'm approximately 7 miles from the phenomenon now. Mara adjusted her heading slightly to get a better angle of approach. Her training told her to maintain safe distance from anything unidentified, but her curiosity, the same curiosity that had made her a good pilot, pushed her closer. 6 miles now. 5 miles. She could see the ground beneath the light more clearly. The earth was definitely different there. Scorched, maybe. Or fused. Hard to tell from this altitude, but the texture and color were wrong for natural desert terrain. The affected area formed a perfect circle, darker than the surrounding sand and rock. Ground control, survey 12. I'm observing what appears to be ground disturbance at the base of the light column. The earth looks burned or altered in some way. Circular pattern, maybe 300 feet in diameter. Copy that, survey 12. Continue to... The radio cut off, not gradually. Not with static. Just instant, complete silence. Mara keyed her microphone. Ground control, survey 12, radio check. Nothing. Not even carrier wave static. Just dead silence. She checked the radio panel. All indicators showed green. Power was good, frequency was correct. The radio should be working, but it wasn't transmitting or receiving. Ground control, do you copy? Still nothing. 4 miles from the light now. 3 miles. Then her radar screen flickered, once, twice, and went dark. Mara felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. She cycled the radar power, nothing. The screen remained black. She checked the other instruments. Navigation system, flickering. Autopilot, unstable. Engine instruments, fluctuating between normal readings and nonsense values. 2 miles from the light, and that's when she saw the reflection. It wasn't a reflection in any normal sense. It was more like a mirage, but three-dimensional and impossibly detailed. In the space between her aircraft and the light column, the air itself seemed to become transparent, revealing something beneath the surface of reality. She saw layers, strata of existence, like geological formations made of light and shadow instead of rock and sediment. And in those layers, she saw things that shouldn't exist. other aircraft, dozens of them, suspended in midair at various altitudes and positions, frozen in time like insects trapped in amber. She recognized some of the models: a B-52 bomber that looked like it was from the 1960s, sleek and massive and completely motionless; a helicopter, possibly military, hanging nose down in an impossible position; several smaller planes she couldn't identify, their paint schemes faded and weathered despite being suspended in the air with no visible means of support. Some of the aircraft looked ancient, their designs from an era she recognized only from history books. Others were more modern, including what appeared to be a fighter jet that couldn't have been more than a few years old. All of them hung motionless in the layers of reflected reality, like a museum display that existed outside of normal space. Mara tried to bank away, tried to turn her aircraft, but the controls wouldn't respond. The yoke moved when she pushed or pulled it, but the aircraft didn't react. The pedals might as well have been bolted to the floor. She was locked on her course, being pulled inexorably toward the light like a moth toward a flame. 1 mile. Her heart was hammering now. Every instinct screamed at her to do something, anything, but her hands were useless. The aircraft continued forward on its own, autopilot offline, controls unresponsive, yet somehow maintaining perfectly level flight. She reached for the autopilot disconnect switch, thinking maybe if she could reset the system she could regain control. Her hand moved toward the panel, fingers extending toward the button, but 6 inches away from the switch, her hand stopped. Simply stopped, like she'd pressed it against an invisible wall. She pushed harder, her muscles strained, her arm trembled with effort. But her hand would not move any closer to that switch. Mara tried with her other hand. Same result. Tried reaching for other switches, other controls. All of them were blocked by the same invisible barrier, allowing her to move freely everywhere except toward any control that might let her change course or turn away. 1/2 mile from the light, the radar screen flickered back to life, showing something that made no sense. The light column appeared on radar as a solid object, but with a radar cross-section that fluctuated wildly. One moment showing as something the size of a building, the next moment as large as a mountain, then shrinking to nothing before ballooning out again. And around that central return, dozens of smaller contacts, the frozen aircraft she'd seen in the reflection. They showed up on radar as stationary targets, hanging in space where nothing should be able to hang. 1/4 mile. The light filled her windscreen now. Pure white. Absolute. It should have been blinding, should have hurt to look at, but somehow it didn't. It was bright, but not painful, intense, but not uncomfortable. Just wrong in a way that Mara's brain couldn't fully process. She could see into the column now, could see that it wasn't just light. There was structure inside it. Geometry. Patterns that her eyes could perceive but her mind couldn't hold on to. Angles that didn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Surfaces that seemed to be both convex and concave simultaneously. And at the center of it all, she saw the aperture. It wasn't a door, wasn't a hole. It was a place where the fabric of reality had been folded back on itself, creating an opening into somewhere else. Somewhere that wasn't the Nevada desert, wasn't Earth, maybe wasn't even part of the same universe. Through that aperture, Mara could see impossible things. Landscapes that existed in more dimensions than she had words for. Structures built according to physics that didn't match anything in her experience. And something else, something vast and ancient and aware, looking back at her through the opening. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Tried to close her eyes, but her eyelids wouldn't respond. She was frozen in place, held rigid by forces she couldn't understand, forced to watch as her aircraft crossed the threshold and entered the column of light. The moment she crossed that boundary, everything changed. Time stopped having meaning. Mara couldn't tell if she'd been in the light for a split second or for hours. Her instruments were useless, spinning wildly or frozen in place. The engines were still running. She could feel the vibration through the airframe, but there was no sense of forward motion. She was suspended, trapped, held in place by something that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than rules. The reflection surrounded her completely now. She could see herself from outside her own body, could see her aircraft frozen in midair, one of many scattered through the column like ornaments in some grotesque three-dimensional display. Could see the desert below and the sky above and everything in between, all existing simultaneously in her field of vision despite that being geometrically impossible. And in those layers of reflected reality, she saw more. Other pilots in other aircraft, some of them moving in slow motion, some of them completely frozen, some of them turning their heads to look at her with expressions of terror or confusion or resignation. She recognized uniforms from different eras, flight suits from the 60s, more modern gear from the 90s, one pilot in equipment so contemporary it might have been from just last year. How long had this been happening? How many aircraft had been caught in this trap? And where were they now? The planes were here, suspended in the light, but were the pilots still inside them? Or had they been taken somewhere else, leaving only their empty aircraft behind as markers of their passage? Mara tried to move, tried to reach out to them, but she had no control over her body. She was awareness without agency, consciousness without form, able only to observe as the light did whatever it wanted with her. Then the attention found her. It came from the aperture, from the things on the other side. A vast consciousness that made her feel like an ant being examined under a microscope. It pressed against her mind, not hostile, but not benign either. Just curious, analytical, studying her the way she might study a particularly interesting insect specimen. The attention probed her memories. She felt it sifting through her past, examining her training, her experiences, her fears and hopes and dreams. It was invasive beyond anything she'd ever experienced. Worse than any interrogation, worse than any medical procedure. This thing was inside her mind, picking through her thoughts like files in a cabinet, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She felt it examining her childhood memories. Learning to ride a bike, her first day of school, her father teaching her the names of stars. It moved through her adolescence, her decision to join the Air Force, her training as a pilot, every relationship, every fear, every moment of joy or sadness or doubt. Nothing was private, nothing was sacred. Then came the pain. It started as a pressure behind her eyes. Then it spread, blooming into her skull, her spine, her entire nervous system. Not physical pain exactly, but something deeper. Pain at the level of consciousness itself, as if her mind was being pulled apart and examined piece by piece. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to thrash, wanted to do anything to make it stop. But she had no voice, no body, just awareness and agony. The pain intensified, peaked, became everything, and then it stopped. Mara gasped, sucking in air, and realized she could feel her body again. Her hands on the yoke, her feet on the pedals, the seat beneath her, the harness across her chest. She blinked. The light was gone. The reflection was gone. She was flying through ordinary sky over ordinary desert. Her instruments were functioning normally. Radar showing clear airspace. Navigation system tracking her position. Communications panel lit up and active. Survey 12, do you copy? Survey 12, respond. Mara, if you can hear this, please respond. Victor's voice. Urgent, almost panicked. Something she'd never heard from him before. Mara grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. Ground control, Survey 12, I'm here. I copy you. Survey 12, thank God. You went dark, lost all telemetry and communication. What's your status? Mara looked around the cockpit. Everything appeared normal. She checked her position on the GPS. She was 15 miles south of where she should be. Ground control, I'm not sure. I experienced some kind of equipment failure. Total electrical malfunction. But everything seems to be working now. Can you describe what happened? What could she say? That she'd been pulled into a column of light? That she'd seen other aircraft frozen in time? That something had reached into her mind and examined her thoughts? Ground control. I had multiple system failures. Lost nav, lost radio, lost most instruments. When everything came back online, I'd drifted off course. I'm not certain of the duration of the failure. Survey 12. You've been off communication for 34 minutes. Do you have any memory of that time period? 34 minutes, half an hour, gone. Mara tried to remember. Tried to recall what had happened inside the light. But it was like trying to hold water in her hands. The memories were slipping away even as she reached for them. Negative, ground control. I have no memory of the last half hour. There was a long pause. Then, Survey 12. Recommend you return to base immediately. We need to check your aircraft systems, and we need medical to give you a once-over. Roger, ground control, returning to base. Mara turned the aircraft and flew back toward the facility. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was still racing. And despite the warmth of the cockpit, she felt cold all the way to her bones. The flight back took 25 minutes. It felt like hours. Mara kept checking her instruments, expecting them to fail again, kept scanning the sky, looking for the light. But there was nothing, just ordinary desert. Ordinary sky, as if the last half hour had never happened. When she landed, there was an ambulance waiting on the tarmac. Paramedics rushed to the aircraft before she'd even shut down the engines. I'm fine, Mara protested as they helped her out of the cockpit. I don't need medical attention, it was just equipment failure. Protocol, ma'am, one of the paramedics said. Any pilot who reports system failure and communication loss gets a full medical evaluation. Non-negotiable. They loaded her into the ambulance and drove her to the base medical facility. Ran tests, blood pressure, heart rate, pupil response, drew blood, asked questions about her symptoms, her memory, her state of mind. Everything came back normal. Her vitals were slightly elevated, heart rate faster than baseline, blood pressure a bit high, but nothing alarming, just consistent with the stress of experiencing multiple system failures while flying solo over restricted airspace. You're cleared for duty, the doctor told her after 2 hours of testing. Everything looks good, but I want you to take the rest of the day off. Go rest. If you experience any unusual symptoms, headaches, nausea, memory problems, anything, come back immediately. Understood, thank you. Mara left the medical facility and walked toward the pilot's quarters. Other contractors watched her as she passed. Word had already spread. Equipment failure. Communication loss. 34 minutes off radar, in a place like this, where routine was religion and any deviation was noteworthy, she'd become the center of attention. She didn't like it. Victor was waiting outside her quarters. He looked worried. Actually worried, which was unusual. In 8 months of working together, she'd never seen him express anything beyond professional courtesy. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I'm fine. What really happened up there? Mara looked at him carefully. There was something in his tone, not curiosity, not concern, something else. Like he already knew the answer and was testing to see if she'd tell the truth. Equipment failure. Everything went dark for about 30 minutes. That's all. Victor nodded slowly. That's all that's going in the official report. What else would I put? I don't know. Maybe something about the light you saw. The phenomenon you reported before you went dark. I saw some kind of reflection, probably atmospheric, nothing significant. Mara. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. I saw the telemetry data before the system crashed. Your aircraft stopped moving, completely stopped, hung in mid-air for 34 minutes and 7 seconds. That's not equipment failure, that's something else. Mara felt her pulse quicken. What are you saying? I'm saying you saw something, and I think you know exactly what you saw. The question is whether you're going to tell the truth or lie about it. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me what happened, because I've been doing this job for 9 years, and I've seen this happen before. Equipment failure, lost time, pilots who come back changed and confused and scared to talk about what they experienced. If you've seen it before, then you know it's better not to talk about it. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yeah. I know, he sighed. Just be careful, okay? File your report. Say it was equipment failure. Don't mention the light, don't mention anything unusual. Trust me on this. Why? Because people who ask too many questions about anomalies out here tend to stop working here, or stop working anywhere, if you catch my meaning. He walked away, leaving Mara standing alone outside her quarters. She went inside and sat on her bed, trying to process everything. The light, the reflection, the frozen aircraft, the attention from something beyond the aperture, and 34 minutes she couldn't remember. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. File your report, say nothing. Mara stared at the message, typed back. Who is this? No response. She deleted the message. It immediately reappeared, exactly the same. File your report, say nothing. She turned off her phone, counted to 10, turned it back on. The message was still there. And now there was a second one. This is not a suggestion. Mara set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what had happened, and someone wanted to make sure she kept quiet about it. She went to her laptop and opened the report filing system, stared at the blank form, equipment malfunction. That's all she needed to write. Just a simple technical issue. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would raise questions or concerns. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could tell the truth, could document what she'd seen. The light, the reflection, the frozen aircraft, make it all official record. But Victor's warning echoed in her mind, and the text message, and the look in that doctor's eyes when he'd told her everything was fine, as if he was reading from a script rather than giving an actual medical opinion. Mara took a deep breath and started typing. At approximately 07:15 hours, while conducting standard atmospheric survey along flight path Alpha 7, aircraft experienced multiple system failures including loss of communications, navigation, and radar. All systems recovered after approximately 30 minutes. No apparent cause identified. Aircraft functioned normally for remainder of flight. Recommend full electrical system inspection and diagnostic testing. No unusual phenomena observed. Flight terminated early due to equipment concerns. Will be available for follow-up questions as needed. She read it over. It was bland, bureaucratic. The kind of report that would be filed away and forgotten. It was also a complete lie. Mara submitted the report and closed her laptop. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Good choice. She threw the phone across the room. 3 days passed. Mara flew 2 more missions, both routine, both without incident. She kept waiting for the light to appear again, kept scanning the horizon for that impossible column of white. But there was nothing. Just ordinary desert, ordinary sky, Maybe it had been a one-time thing, an anomaly, a glitch in reality that had closed as quickly as it opened. Or maybe she'd been warned off. Maybe whatever controlled that light had decided she wasn't worth the trouble and had moved on to other targets. On the fourth day, Mara arrived at the pre-flight briefing room and noticed something wrong immediately. Victor wasn't there. The mission coordinator for her flight was someone else. A man she'd never seen before, younger, with the kind of carefully neutral expression that suggested military training. "Where's Victor?" Mara asked. The man looked up from his tablet. "Who?" "Victor Hale. He's usually my mission coordinator." "Don't know anyone by that name. I'm Paul Reeves. I'll be coordinating your flight today." Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Victor Hale has been coordinating my flights for 8 months. You must know him." Paul shook his head. "Sorry. You must have me confused with someone else. I've been here for 2 years and there's no Victor Hale on the coordination staff. That's impossible. I've worked with him dozens of times. Maybe you're thinking of a different facility." "No, here, this facility. Victor Hale, mid-30s, brown hair, usually drinks coffee from a blue thermos, sits at the third workstation in ground control." Paul's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, I don't know who you're talking about. Now, if you're ready, we should go over your flight plan." Mara felt like the ground was tilting beneath her. This wasn't right. Victor existed. He was real. She'd talked to him dozens of times, had worked with him just 3 days ago. She went through the briefing mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When it was done, she went to the ground control facility and looked through the window. 3 workstations, just as she remembered. But the third one, Victor's station, was empty, and there was no blue thermos. No worn spot on the chair where he always sat. No photos or personal items that would suggest anyone worked there regularly. Mara pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. Scrolled to Victor's name, tapped it. The number didn't connect. Just a recorded message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." She checked her email, searched for messages from Victor, found dozens of them. Flight confirmations, weather updates, routine coordination messages, but they were all showing as coming from vail@facility.gov. And when she tried to click on the address to see more details, the emails disappeared. One by one, they vanished from her inbox as she watched. Within 30 seconds, every message from Victor was gone, as if they'd never existed. Mara felt panic rising in her chest. This wasn't possible. People didn't just vanish. Records didn't just erase themselves. She went to the administration office and asked to speak to the personnel coordinator. "I need to find someone," she told the woman behind the desk. "Victor Hale. He works in ground control. I need to know which shift he's working today." The woman typed on her computer. Frowned, typed some more. "I'm not finding anyone by that name in our system. He's been here for years. Mission coordinator, ground control staff." "Ma'am, I have access to all personnel records for this facility. There's no Victor Hale employed here. Are you sure you have the right name?" "I'm certain." "Could he work at a different facility? We have several in the area." "No, here. I've worked with him directly." The woman's expression shifted to something that looked like concern. "Ma'am, have you been under a lot of stress lately? Have you experienced any head injuries, blackouts, or confusion?" "I'm not confused. Victor Hale exists. He coordinated my flight 4 days ago, the flight where I experienced the equipment failure." The woman's expression changed again. Now it was careful, guarded. "I see. Let me make a note of this. If you'd like, I can have someone from medical reach out to you." "I don't need medical. I need to know where Victor Hale is." "Ma'am, I can't help you find someone who doesn't exist in our records. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." Mara left the office, her mind reeling. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Victor had been real. She had memories of conversations with him, of working together, of his voice in her headset guiding her through dozens of flights. She went to the commissary and found 2 other pilots she'd flown with over the past year. Approached their table. "Either of you know Victor Hale?" They both looked at her blankly. "Ground control coordinator," Mara continued. "Works the morning shifts." "Sorry," one of them said. "Doesn't ring a bell." "You've never heard his name? Never seen him in the control room?" "I work with a guy named Paul and a woman named Sarah. That's it, no Victor." Mara felt like she was losing her mind. "He exists. I've worked with him for 8 months." The 2 pilots exchanged glances. One of them spoke gently. "You okay, Mara? You've seemed a bit stressed since that equipment failure. Maybe you should talk to someone." "I'm not stressed. I'm not confused. Victor Hale is real." "Okay," the pilot said, in the tone of voice people use with someone who's clearly unwell. "Sure, Victor Hale. Got it." Mara walked away from the table, feeling their eyes on her back. They thought she was crazy. Maybe she was. Maybe the light had done something to her brain. Maybe the missing 34 minutes had scrambled her memories. But no, she remembered Victor too clearly, too vividly. He wasn't a hallucination or a false memory. He'd been erased. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what was happening. At Morceau 17 hours, her phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. "Stop asking about Victor Hale." She sat up, grabbed the phone, typed back, "What did you do to him?" "He made poor choices. Don't make the same mistake. Where is he?" "Somewhere you don't want to be." "Who are you?" "Someone trying to protect you." Victor asked too many questions, filed reports that drew attention, made himself a problem. You have a choice. Learn from his mistake or follow his path. What path? What happened to him? He doesn't exist anymore. Neither will you if you keep pushing. Mara's hands were shaking. "I saw something out there. In the light, you can't just erase everyone who sees it." "We can. We have. For decades. You're not special, Ms. Lewis. You're just another witness who needs to decide between silence and erasure. I'll go public. I'll tell people what I saw. Who would believe you? A pilot with no evidence talking about lights in the desert. They'll call you crazy, paranoid, unstable. They'll ground you, revoke your security clearance, destroy your career. And if you keep talking, they'll do worse." "They? Who's they?" The next message took longer to arrive. "People who understand what's out there. People who've decided the world isn't ready to know. People with the resources to make problems disappear. Victor found that out too late. Don't be like Victor." Mara stared at the messages, feeling the weight of the threat. Whoever this was, they had power. Access. The ability to erase records and make people vanish. She typed, "What do you want from me?" Silence. "Forget what you saw. Forget Victor. Forget the light. Live your life. That's all we ask. And if I can't forget, then you'll wish you had." The messages stopped. No matter what Mara typed, there was no response. The unknown number had gone dark. She sat in the darkness of her quarters, phone in hand, trying to decide what to do. Victor had asked questions, had apparently filed reports about whatever he'd seen or suspected, and now he was gone. Erased so thoroughly that even the records of his employment had been wiped clean. And they were telling her she'd meet the same fate if she didn't comply. Mara should have been terrified, should have been ready to take their deal, stay silent, and move on with her life. But instead, she felt something else. anger. Victor had been a real person, had existed, had maybe even been trying to do the right thing by documenting whatever was happening out in the restricted zones. And they'd erased him, made him an unperson. And now they expected her to just accept it and stay quiet. She couldn't do that. The next morning, Mara requested access to the facility archives. Research for a personal project, she told the librarian. Historical data on atmospheric testing from the 1950s and 60s. Nothing sensitive. Just old reports that had been declassified decades ago. The librarian gave her access to the archives, a climate-controlled room filled with filing cabinets and boxes of old documents. Mara spent 6 hours searching, looking for any mention of unexplained phenomena, lights in the sky, equipment failures, missing time, anything that might corroborate what she'd experienced. She found more than she expected, tucked away in reports from 1956, 1963, 1971, 1984, and a dozen other years were incident logs. Pilots reporting unusual visual phenomena, aircraft experiencing total electrical failure over specific coordinates, witnesses describing columns of light rising from the desert floor. And in every case, the follow-up investigation concluded the same thing. Equipment malfunction, atmospheric anomaly, pilot error. Nothing unusual, nothing to see here. But Mara could read between the lines, could see the pattern. This had been happening for decades, and for decades it had been covered up. She took photos of the documents with her phone. Dozens of pages, hundreds of pages. Evidence that whatever she'd seen was neither new nor unique. As she was leaving the archives, the librarian stopped her. "Find what you were looking for." "Yes, thank you." "Good. By the way, there was a notation in the system. Your access to this facility has been revoked, effective immediately." Mara felt cold. On whose authority? Facility security. No explanation given. "I'm sorry, but you won't be able to access the archives again." "I see. Thank you for letting me know." She went back to her quarters and transferred the photos from her phone to her laptop, then to an encrypted USB drive, then to 2 different cloud storage services. If they wanted to erase her evidence, they'd have to work for it. That evening, there was a knock on her door. Mara opened it to find 2 men in dark suits standing in the hallway. "Ms. Lewis, we need you to come with us." "Am I being detained?" "We need to ask you some questions. It won't take long." They led her to an office building she'd never been inside before, deep in the administrative section of the facility, past security checkpoints she didn't know existed. The room they put her in was windowless, gray walls, metal table, 3 chairs, standard interrogation setup. One of the men sat across from her, the other stood by the door. "Ms. Lewis, my name is Agent Morrison. I work with facility security. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention." "What concerns?" "You've been asking questions about a person named Victor Hale, about incidents in restricted airspace, about archived reports of unusual phenomena." "I was conducting research." "Research into what?" "Historical atmospheric data, nothing classified." "And the questions about Victor Hale?" "I was mistaken, mixed him up with someone else." Morrison opened a folder and pulled out several printed pages. They were the photos Mara had taken in the archives. "These images were uploaded to your cloud storage account 6 hours ago. Multiple copies distributed across different services. That suggests you're not just casually researching. That suggests you're gathering evidence." "Evidence of what?" "You tell me. What are you trying to prove?" Mara kept her expression neutral. "Those are historical documents, public record. I'm not trying to prove anything." "Ms. Lewis, let me be direct. You experienced something during your flight 4 days ago, something that confused you, frightened you, and now you're looking for explanations. That's natural, but you're looking in the wrong places. Where should I be looking? At your mental health. Traumatic experiences can cause false memories, confabulation, your brain trying to fill in gaps it can't explain. That's likely what happened with this Victor Hale person. You created a memory of someone who never existed because your mind needed an explanation for the stress you were under. I didn't create Victor. He was real. There are no employment records. No one at this facility knows him. His name doesn't appear in any system. How do you explain that? I can't, but I know what I remember. Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Lewis, this facility has protocols. When someone experiences a traumatic event, we monitor them. We make sure they're psychologically stable. Your behavior over the past few days, asking about non-existent people, photographing old reports, creating elaborate backups of innocuous data, suggests you may not be stable. I'm fine. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's having a break with reality. Someone who might not be fit to continue flying sensitive missions over restricted airspace. The threat was clear. Stop asking questions, or lose your job. What do you want from me? Mara asked. I want you to accept that Victor Hale doesn't exist. I want you to delete those photos. I want you to focus on your work and stop trying to find patterns in historical coincidences. Can you do that? Mara thought about Victor, about the light, about decades of cover-ups and erasures. She thought about taking the easy path, agreeing, staying silent, keeping her job. But then she thought about what might happen to the next pilot who saw the light, and the one after that, an endless chain of witnesses who were threatened into silence or erased completely. Someone had to break the cycle. No, she said quietly. I can't do that. Morrison's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. You're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. You'll undergo psychiatric evaluation. If you're deemed fit for duty, you may be reinstated. If not, he shrugged. Well, there are other career paths. You're grounding me because I asked questions. I'm grounding you because you're displaying signs of mental instability. This is for your own safety, and the safety of others who fly with you. They escorted Mara back to her quarters, gave her 2 hours to pack her belongings, informed her that a security officer would accompany her off-site and that she was prohibited from returning to the facility without authorization. As Mara packed, her phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. Last chance. Delete the files. Stay quiet. You can still salvage this. She turned off her phone and finished packing. They'd tried to silence her. They'd tried to make her doubt herself. But they'd also confirmed everything she suspected. Victor had been real. The light was real. And whatever was out there in the desert, they were willing to destroy lives to keep it secret. Mara wasn't sure what she'd do next. But she knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't going to be silent. Mara spent her first week of administrative leave in a motel 50 miles from the facility. She needed distance, needed time to think, needed to figure out what to do with the evidence she'd gathered. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday. If she failed it, and she was certain they'd make sure she failed, her career in aviation was over. They'd label her unstable, revoke her clearances, and make sure no one else would hire her for sensitive work. But that was only a problem if she still wanted to fly for them. The more Mara thought about it, the more she realized her only option was to go public. Release everything she had. The photos, the documents, her own testimony, and let the world decide what to make of it. It would destroy her reputation. She'd be labeled a conspiracy theorist, A crackpot. Someone who'd had a breakdown and invented elaborate fantasies about lights in the desert. But at least the information would be out there. At least Victor's disappearance would be documented. At least future witnesses would know they weren't alone. On the 8th day of her leave, someone knocked on Mara's motel room door. She looked through the peephole and saw a woman she didn't recognize. Mid-50s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase. Mara opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "Can I help you?" "Ms. Lewis, my name is Dr. Sarah Kincaid. I'm a physicist from Stanford. I received your cloud storage files." Mara felt her pulse quicken. "I didn't send anything to anyone. Your files were flagged by a monitoring program I run. It looks for patterns in publicly accessible data. Your uploads contained keywords that triggered my algorithm. May I come in? I promise I'm not here to threaten you." Mara studied the woman's face. She looked tired, earnest, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she'd seen things she couldn't explain. Mara unlatched the chain and let her in. Dr. Kincaid sat at the small table and opened her briefcase, pulled out a laptop and several folders filled with documents. "I've been studying the Nevada test range phenomena for 15 years, she said. "Unofficially, on my own time, because the official channels won't touch it." "What phenomena?" "The lights, the time distortions, the disappearances. Everything you've experienced, Ms. Lewis. Everything they've been covering up since the 1940s. She opened one of the folders and spread photos across the table. They showed the same thing Mara had seen. Columns of light rising from the desert, captured from various angles and distances. These are from different incidents spanning 60 years. Same location, same phenomenon, same cover-up. I have testimony from 17 different witnesses, all of whom experienced what you experienced, and all of whom were silenced." Mara picked up one of the photos. It was dated 1987 and showed the light exactly as she'd seen it. "How did you get these?" "Some from Freedom of Information requests, some from witnesses who found me, some from leaks. I've been compiling evidence for years, waiting for the right time to go public." "Why haven't you?" "Because I'm a coward." Dr. Kincaid smiled bitterly. "I have tenure, a reputation, a career I don't want to throw away. Every time I get close to releasing this information, I think about what it will cost me, and I back down." "Then why are you here?" "Because I saw what happened to Victor Hale." Mara sat down heavily. "You knew Victor." "Knew of him. He was one of my sources. Sent me data he'd collected over years of coordination work. And then he disappeared. Completely erased, and I did nothing. I was too scared to speak up, too scared to risk my career." She pulled out another folder. This one contained photos of people. Pilots, engineers, security personnel, dozens of faces. These are all witnesses, people who've seen the phenomenon over the decades. Some agreed to stay silent. Some tried to go public and were discredited. And some, she tapped a subset of the photos, some simply vanished, like Victor, no records, no trace, as if they never existed. How is that possible? I don't know, but I have theories. Classified programs, compartmentalized operations, people with the authority to alter records and rewrite history. Maybe even with technology we don't understand. She looked at Mara intently. "You're in danger, Ms. Lewis. Real danger. They've already grounded you. The next step will be discrediting you. And if that doesn't work," she gestured to the photos of disappeared witnesses. "So what do I do? You have two choices. Stay silent and survive, or go public and accept the consequences." "You said you've been too scared to go public. What's changed?" Dr. Kincaid pulled out one final document. A letter, handwritten. This arrived at my office 3 days ago. No return address. It's from Victor Hale. Mara grabbed the letter and read, Dr. Kincaid, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. They warned me to stop investigating, stop documenting, stop asking questions. I didn't listen. Now I'm paying the price. I don't know exactly what they'll do to me, but I know it involves erasing my existence, making it so I never worked at the facility, never filed my reports, never existed. I'm writing this while I still can, while I still have access to a computer and a mailbox and some small measure of freedom. By the time you receive it, I'll be somewhere else, somewhere they can control me completely. Don't let them win. Don't let my disappearance mean nothing. Release the evidence, tell the world. Someone has to. Victor Hale. Mara's hands were shaking. He's alive? According to this, he was alive 3 days before he disappeared. Whether he still is, Dr. Kincaid shrugged. I don't know. Where would they take him? I have theories. Psychiatric facilities, black sites, places where people can be held indefinitely without trial or due process, but I have no proof. Mara set down the letter. What do you want from me? Your testimony, your evidence, your willingness to stand up publicly and confirm what I've been researching. Together, we might have enough to force disclosure, to make it too big to ignore or suppress. They'll destroy us both. Probably. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have told the truth. Mara thought about the light, about the reflection, about the attention from something beyond the aperture, about Victor, erased from history, about all the witnesses who'd stayed silent out of fear. Okay, she said, let's do it. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Dr. Kincaid compiled her research into a comprehensive report. Hundreds of pages documenting incidents, witness testimony, physical evidence, and government cover-ups spanning 70 years. Mara added her own testimony, detailed description of what she'd seen, the technical data from her flight, the missing time, the threats she'd received. Victor's disappearance. They encrypted everything and prepared to release it to multiple journalists, scientists, and politicians simultaneously. Once it was out, it couldn't be suppressed. On the morning they were scheduled to release the files, Mara's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? A mechanical voice, distorted and artificial. Ms. Lewis, this is your final warning. Do not release those files. Who is this? Someone who knows what's at stake. Someone who understands that the world is not ready for this information. The world deserves to know the truth. The truth will cause panic, chaos, the destabilization of governments and institutions. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I'm prepared to stop hiding. Then you're a fool. What you saw through that aperture, that's not something humans are equipped to understand. It's not aliens from another planet. It's something far worse, something that exists outside the normal rules of reality. And if people know about it, if they start trying to interact with it, the consequences will be catastrophic. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself why that phenomenon has been contained for 70 years. Why so much effort has gone into suppressing information? It's not to protect the government. It's to protect humanity from something we're not ready to face. I don't believe you. Then release your files, see what happens. But know that blood will be on your hands. Every person who goes looking for that aperture and doesn't come back, that's your responsibility. Every scientist who tries to study it and loses their mind, that's your fault. Every government that collapses trying to manage the fallout, You did that." The line went dead. Mara sat holding the phone, feeling the weight of the warning. Dr. Kincaid looked at her. What did they say? They said releasing this information will cause catastrophic consequences, that people will die trying to study the phenomenon. Do you believe them? I don't know, but I know they're scared, and that suggests we're on the right track, so we proceed. Mara thought about Victor, about all the disappeared witnesses, about decades of cover-ups and lies. We proceed. They released the files at noon on a Thursday, sent them to 50 different recipients, uploaded them to multiple platforms, made them impossible to suppress. Within an hour, the first articles started appearing. Scientists examining the data, journalists investigating the claims, politicians calling for hearings. Within 6 hours, it was the top story on every major news outlet. Within 12 hours, the government issued a statement denying everything, called it an elaborate hoax, claimed the documents were fabricated and the witnesses unreliable. Within 24 hours, Mara and Dr. Kincaid were both subpoenaed to testify before Congress. The hearings lasted for 3 weeks. Mara told her story under oath, described what she'd seen, presented her evidence, answered every question honestly. Dr. Kincaid presented her research, decades of documentation, scientific analysis, testimony from multiple witnesses. The government continued to deny, but the evidence was overwhelming, too much to dismiss, too consistent to explain away as hallucination or hoax. In the end, a commission was formed, a full investigation ordered, promises of transparency and disclosure. Whether those promises would be kept remained to be seen, but the information was out. The phenomenon was public knowledge, and witnesses around the world started coming forward with their own stories. 3 months after the hearings, Mara received a package. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with 2 words written in familiar handwriting. Thank you. VH. Victor was alive. Somewhere. And he knew what she'd done. Mara never returned to flying. Her security clearances were permanently revoked. Her reputation as a pilot destroyed. But she'd told the truth, had brought the phenomenon into the light, had given voice to decades of silenced witnesses. And sometimes, late at night, when she looked up at the stars, Mara wondered about the aperture, about what existed on the other side, about whether humanity was truly ready to face it. She didn't have answers, but at least now, people could ask the questions. The silence had been broken, and the world would never be the same. 6 months after the disclosure, Mara received an email. The subject line simply read, "Meeting." She opened it. The message was brief. "There are others like you, others who've seen what you've seen. We're forming a group, researchers, witnesses, scientists, people dedicated to understanding the phenomenon rather than hiding from it. If you're interested, reply to this email." Mara stared at the message for a long time. She could ignore it, could try to move on with her life, put the past behind her, or she could continue pursuing the truth. She hit reply and typed, "I'm interested. Tell me more." The response came within minutes. "We meet next month in Albuquerque. Small group, 20 people. All of us have seen things we can't explain. All of us want answers. Dr. Kincaid will be there, and someone you've been looking for." Mara's heart skipped. "Victor? Come to the meeting. See for yourself." She booked her flight that evening. The meeting was held in a conference room at a small hotel. When Mara arrived, she found 15 people already gathered. She recognized Dr. Kincaid immediately. The older woman smiled and waved her over. "Glad you could make it," Dr. Kincaid said. There are some people I want you to meet. She introduced Mara to the others. Pilots who'd experienced missing time. Engineers who'd witnessed impossible phenomena. Scientists who'd studied the data and come to frightening conclusions. And in the back of the room, standing alone by the window, was a man Mara recognized. Victor Hale. He looked different, thinner, older. There was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, but it was him. Mara crossed the room. "Victor?" He turned and smiled. "Hey, Mara. Been a while. They said you didn't exist, that you'd been erased." "I was, for about 4 months. Psychiatric facility, classified location. They kept me drugged, tried to convince me I'd imagined everything, but I knew what I'd seen, knew what was real." "How did you get out?" "Dr. Kincaid. She found me, or rather she found someone who knew where I was, pulled some strings, got me released, gave me a new identity so they couldn't find me again." "Why didn't you contact me?" "Because you were being watched, still are probably. I didn't want to put you at more risk." "What happened to you in there?" Victor's expression darkened. "Things I don't like to talk about. But I learned something important. The people running that place, the ones trying to suppress information about the phenomenon, they're not evil. They're terrified." "Of what?" "Of what's on the other side of that aperture. They know more than they're saying, and what they know scares them badly enough to disappear people like us." The meeting began. For 3 hours, the group shared their experiences, their evidence, their theories about what the phenomenon might be. Some believed it was extraterrestrial. Others thought it was interdimensional. A few suspected it was something humanity had created accidentally through nuclear testing. But everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever it was real, and it needed to be studied, not hidden. At the end of the meeting, Dr. Kincaid stood and addressed the group. "We've all paid a price for seeking the truth. Lost careers, lost reputations. Some of us lost years of our lives. But we're here because we believe that truth matters more than comfort. That understanding matters more than ignorance." She paused. "The government has promised transparency. We'll see if they deliver, but whether they do or not, we're going to continue this work. We're going to study the phenomenon, document it, try to understand it, because that's what scientists do. We seek truth, no matter the cost." The room erupted in applause. After the meeting, Mara and Victor stood together on the hotel balcony, looking out at the New Mexico night. "You ever regret it?" Victor asked. "Going public, losing everything?" "Sometimes," Mara admitted. "But then I think about all the witnesses who stayed silent. All the people who saw something incredible and were too scared to speak, and I'm glad I didn't become one of them." "Me too." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victor spoke again. "You know what the scariest part is? Not what we saw. Not the light or the aperture or the missing time. What then? The fact that it's still there, still active, still pulling aircraft into that column of light. And now that the world knows about it, how long before someone does something stupid? How long before some government or corporation or rogue scientist decides to try to weaponize it?" Mara hadn't thought about that. "You think that's possible?" "I think humans have a talent for turning discoveries into weapons. And if that happens, if someone tries to harness whatever power that aperture represents..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both understood. The phenomenon wasn't just a mystery to be solved. It was a danger to be managed. And now that the secret was out, that danger had only increased. "So, what do we do?" Mara asked. "We keep studying it, keep documenting, keep trying to understand it before someone else tries to exploit it. Because knowledge is our only defense against the unknown." That sounds like something Dr. Kincaid would say. Victor smiled. She's been a good teacher. They returned to the conference room where the group was still gathered, trading contact information, making plans for future research. Mara looked around at the faces. All of them had seen things that defied explanation. All of them had paid a price for seeking truth. But they were still here, still fighting, still refusing to accept silence as an answer. And maybe that was what mattered most. Not having all the answers. Not understanding everything. Just refusing to stop asking questions. The silence had been broken, and whatever came next, they would face it together.